You know it's this. Take a perk and talk it and see. Money swallowed like sis. They done perfected the kid. Got a billion who take on my hate. I've been better put out the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil, they shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Naruto Enters Assassin's Creed. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of SomeDamn author on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The village hidden in the leaves. Okay, guys, I guess I'll be seeing you later then. Wait, Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki froze. He knew what that tone indicated. Sooner or later, he'd have to give in. Where do you think you're going? I want some answers. Naruto turned. Sasuke was glaring at him, and Sekiro was giving him an odd look. You don't plan on not telling us, do you, Naruto? Naruto had dreaded this moment ever since they'd completed Kakashi's test. He needed to explain a lot, Naruto thought, looking at Sasuke and Sekira's faces. Alright, so what is it? First off, what's that weapon you have hidden in your wrist? Sasuke was eyeing the minimal bulge that the hidden blade mechanism created around his fully covered wrist. And where did you get it? Sekira added. Naruto sighed, shaking his head. Alright, you guys, I'll tell you what. I'll explain everything, I promise I will. Tomorrow. Sasuke's scowl, which had disappeared the moment he'd said that he would explain everything, reappeared at his latter sentence. What are you playing at, idiot? You know you'll need to tell us sometime, right? Look, it's a really long story, and it's important that I not miss out any details. That wouldn't do now, would it? Fine then, you tell us tomorrow, but make sure you tell it all, Sekira declared, with an identical scowl on her face. Wow, talk about curiosity. Here it is, though. As Sasuke was turning to leave, Naruto made his hidden blade descend, the sound drawing both Sasuke's and Sekira's attention. Just like he'd done back with Kakashi, Naruto held it up to the sunlight, for them to see. Both of their eyes widened at the sight. Naruto grinned inwardly. Oh man, this is priceless. As long as I'm showing off without telling too much, it sure is fun. Naruto could identify with that look. The first time, when he'd seen Master Altair's blade. Can I touch it? Naruto laughed. Sure, Sekira-chan. Go ahead. Naruto held out his hand and pulled back his sleeve. His wrist came in view. Sekira slid 2 fingers over the surface of the blade, while Sasuke observed the way it was strapped to his wrist. Naruto looked closely at Sekira's face. She still retained that fascinated look, but was also prodding at the rest of the blade inquisitively. Suddenly, she seemed to realize how close she was standing to Naruto, and leaned back quickly, with a trace of red on her cheeks. Well hey, looks I've still got a chance. Alright, time's up. Naruto slid the blade back into place, and slid his sleeve over his wrist once more. Remember, Uzumaki, tomorrow. Sure thing, I'll see you around. As he turned around, he could hear Sekira and Sasuke leaving. Obscurely though, Naruto thought he heard Sekira eagerly ask Sasuke if he wanted to eat with her. Or maybe not. Shrugging his mind free of the thought, Naruto started to make his way towards his house. Exhaling loudly, Naruto blinked several times, his vision refocused to show his ceiling. Still lying in bed, Naruto smacked his lips and eyed his clock. 5 o'clock. Still pretty early, I could go back to sleep, you know. Grunting, Naruto sat up. Nah, don't think I will. Naruto got up and waddled towards his bathroom. Wonder what Altair would say if he saw me slacking off at this hour. Naruto laughed inwardly. It wasn't often Master could be provoked. In fact, he'd never seen him angry, but he was almost certain that him oversleeping would draw a reaction from the usually stoic leader. After splashing sufficient water on his face and cleaning his mouth, Naruto slipped on his jacket and hidden blade. Walking back into his room, Naruto paused for a second to look around. His room back at Masyaf was completely different. That room held a peaceful, serene air to it. This one promised something bright and vibrant. Naruto had decided that both the rooms were good in their own respects. Right, time to go. Uttering the sacred words, Naruto leapt out of his window, and as the air welcomed him, just something seemed to tell him that he'd have to meet Master Altair again sooner rather than later. Naruto sat down, not at all tired by the run. He had just reached their training grounds, and it seemed as though he had quite some time to spare. Naruto slowly let his mind wander back to yesterday. There had been a time when his thoughts had been interrupted. Because what I have is not a dream. I will soon make it reality. Sasuke Uchiha had declared thus when questioned about his dream. Naruto had snorted back then when the Uchiha had uttered those words. He didn't know why, but hearing Sasuke say that gave him a bad feeling. The Uchiha clan massacre. Just repeating the name of that incident made Naruto's spirits drop. Yet, that was where Naruto started and opened his eyes. Sasuke and Sakura were walking up to him. He groaned inwardly. What were you doing, Uzumaki? Sleeping. Naruto frowned at Sasuke. Meditation. It might help ease that permanent frown off your face. Try it. Sakura looked at him strangely while Sasuke snorted. Hey, it's not all that easy, you know. You have to stop. You know what we really want from you. Get to it already. Naruto dropped his head. So, you guys want to know where I went and what I learnt? Both Sasuke and Sakura nodded their heads firmly. Alright, simple. 7 years ago, for reasons I don't know, the Hokage ordered a certain man to take me away from this village. Naruto paused. Sakura's eyes widened. The Hokage ordered. Yes, the Hokage. That man took me away, far away from this place, to a much colder region. I trained there, and for reasons unknown to me I'm back now. Naruto gritted his teeth inwardly. He knew there was no way Sasuke and Sakura would be satisfied with this kind of response. Yet for some reason, Naruto felt he wasn't ready to disclose everything just yet to his friends. That's it. You really don't want to tell us, do you? Naruto fidgeted and looked up at his two teammates, not meeting their eyes. Guys, I'm so sorry, I just can't. What the he? No, it's alright. Naruto couldn't have been more surprised when Sakura, out of all people, interrupted Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke stopped short and looked at her with a frown. Sakura, still maintaining her composure, continued. I mean, you're our teammate, right? Naruto nodded, looking at her in amazement. And you'll have to tell us one day. So it's not a problem if you don't feel like it today, Naruto. The blonde, still looking at her, broke into a wide grin. That helps a lot, Sakura-chan. Thank you. You guys are the best. Sakura smiled back at him while Sasuke stopped glaring at him. It's fine, Uzumaki, but you'll have to spit it out, whatever it is. Naruto nodded. And now, to make up for your wasting time, spar with me. The Uchiha boy was loosening and tightening his knuckles even as he spoke. It wasn't even a question. Naruto looked at Sasuke, grinning. You sure you want to get beaten up? Don't be so cocky. Remember that first kunai throw. Remember the second. Sakura was looking between the two of them with a worried expression. Where's our sensei? Curse him. Do you really think you should be sparring? Kakashi-sensei hasn't. She cut her sentence short when she saw that both Naruto and Sasuke had slipped into their stances. You know, back then, against Kakashi ... you used a unique fighting style. One that I hadn't seen before. Naruto nodded and laughed. Yeah, it's the style I learnt when I was gone for so many years. Alright, Uzumaki, let's see how many flaws your style has. With a crisp cracking sound, Sasuke started his run towards Naruto. Eager to attack, are we? When Sasuke reached out to Naruto with his fist, Naruto sidestepped the whole attack neatly. Sakura Haruno's eyes widened. It wasn't often a student their age could have managed to avoid Sasuke's strike at full speed. Sasuke-kun'll surely win, though, right? I mean, Naruto's style is. Sasuke, however, had expected that dodge from Naruto. Twisting his body slightly, he reared and lashed out heavily with his right leg. Naruto smiled. Too predictable. Just as the kick threatened to explode on his face, with slick movement, Naruto's hand slid out and simply diverted the kick off a different angle. It's my turn now. Naruto moved and closed in for a punch. Sasuke, who'd already seen it coming, dodged to Naruto's left. He thinks I prefer my right hand. And so, the moment Sasuke had dodged left, Naruto's left hand slid out, delivering a meaty jab to Sasuke's stomach. The clean contact sent Sasuke staggering back, grunting. Well, Uzumaki, it seems you can use both your hands very well. That must have required enormous practice. Yeah, it did. That's the whole point. Meanwhile, Sakura was staring at the two sparring boys, wide-eyed. Naruto had not only avoided Sasuke's strike, but had retaliated with what Sakura had thought was his weaker arm. However, it seemed as if Naruto could use both arms equally well. I'm not done yet. This time, Naruto closed in with a palm extended, and Sasuke was forced to duck to avoid it. This seemed to give Naruto the advantage, as he countered with a lower left kick. Sasuke parried with a grunt, and the spar was off in full swing again. The blonde-haired boy helped the raven-haired one up. Both boys seemed to be panting, though Sasuke's breath seemed shallower than Naruto's. Not bad at all, dope. Been a while since you called me that. I could say the same about you. The spar had seemed to come to an end. Although neither had had the upper hand, Naruto seemed better off than Sasuke, who was winded after their rigorous bout. Although, you didn't use that blade of yours, I noticed. What? Oh, the blade. Instinctively, the blade descended from Naruto's wrist, drawing Sasuke's attention. Nah, the blade is only supposed to be used for when I want to kill. Sasuke looked at Naruto strangely. Have you ever done it then? What? Killed somebody? Killed somebody? Mizuki. Yes. Nah, what makes you think that? Nothing. Sasuke stopped talking when Sakura came running up to them. Well, Naruto, you're really good at taijutsu. Naruto, who was expecting Sakura to probably reprimand him for hurting Sasuke, was taken aback by the compliment. Nonetheless, he was extremely pleased. Hey, do you want to spar with me? Naruto looked up so fast he cricked his neck. He was immediately disappointed though when he saw that she was addressing Sasuke. Sasuke glanced at Naruto, then at Sakura, and then shook his head. Sakura's shoulders drooped in disappointment. Hey, Sakura, I'll spar with you. Sakura turned towards Naruto, and then smiled suddenly. Thanks a lot. Let's go. Naruto's spirits rose immediately. He got up quick as a flash, but was stopped when he felt a hand on his shoulder. You're late. Naruto, Sasuke and Kakashi Hadake winced at the same time. Naruto turned around with a questioning look on his face. Any specific reason you were late, sensei? Oh, I met a cute girl who wanted to dance with me. Sasuke snorted. Was the cute girl Kurenai sensei? Kakashi spluttered, while the three students broke out into laughter. The most important dynamic for a team is, funnily enough, teamwork. Here in the world of shinobi, nothing goes by plan. However, perfect teamwork and understanding each other's moves can nullify that disadvantage. Get it? Sakura, Sasuke and Naruto were sitting down, while Kakashi standing up in front of them. The three of them had expected him to start teaching them some technique or the other, but to their surprise, he had instructed them to sit down instead. So, before we start on individual attack patterns, I'm going to make sure you guys work well in tandem. Let's begin. The three of them looked at Kakashi. I'll give you a scenario. The three of you are being opposed by three mid-level chunin. How would you get past them? Naruto, you first. Naruto cocked his head up and declared, I'll make 4 shadow clones and surround them from all sides. Sasuke, I'll try to separate them and beat them one by one. Sakura, I would have Naruto's shadow clones distract them while the three of us try to escape. Naruto and Sasuke both looked at Sakura with an odd expression. However, Kakashi clapped his hands. Both their looks turned to looks of disbelief. They opened their mouths in protest, but were cut short by Kakashi. No, listen, I said mid-level chunin, which means I specified their strengths. There is always a difference between cowardice and quick thinking. Running away without assessing your opponent's strengths is cowardice. However, when the opponent is clearly stronger than you, and unless you have no other choice, a ninja wouldn't take that fight, not toe-to-toe. Looking down at his students, Kakashi continued, these are the situations you'll be up against in your missions as genin. Do you understand? When the three of them nodded, Kakashi smiled through his mark. Then after that rather serious lecture, time for a mission. There was a stunned silence. You mean it? You're the best sensei ever. 2 hours later. Best sensei ever. Sasuke quoted, while mopping his perspiring brow. Naruto was actually winded, and Sakura had already sunk to the ground, steeped in despair, slowly entertaining doubts about her sanity. What kind of sensei gives his team a mission like this? Seriously, catching goddamn cats. The students' initial enthusiasm had been put out immediately when they realized that their first mission was going to be to catch a cat. And so, after briefing them about their mission, Kakashi had just left with his book in hand, with what Naruto realized now was a snigger. That cat has arrived straight from hell. I swear, if it scratches me just one more bloody time, I'll... Listen, Baka. Sasuke and Naruto both jumped at Sakura's sudden outburst. There is a reason this mission is a mission. Oh, Sasuke sneered. Ignoring the sarcasm in his voice, Sakura continued, this is obviously another test for us to work together. What have we been doing until now, then? We just haven't been working in the right direction. Listen, this is what I think we should do. It was only late in the evening, and after many yells, screams, and expletives of anger and despair, that Kakashi stood in front of his 3 disheveled students. Sasuke and Naruto seemed to be constantly cursing under their breaths, while Sakura held out the cat to Kakashi. I see. Alright then. You finally managed to catch the cat. No shit. Now, let's not all start yelling at each other. Look at Sakura for example. Look how calm and collected little Sakura is. What kind of mission was that? Who in the name of God owns that cat? Who even listed this as a mission? That was a D rank. Sakura, the owner is the fire daimyo's wife, and the Hokage, Kakashi replied, with an even expression. The Hokage listed this mission. That's right. Alright, you 3. Tomorrow, 7. Barely nodding, Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke flopped onto the ground. Man, what a day, huh? As Naruto sank into his bed that night, his thoughts couldn't help but drift towards his other two teammates. Team 7. Of course, Naruto would never say it out loud, but having Sasuke in a team with him wasn't bad at all. In fact, Sasuke was someone Naruto looked at as a rival of sorts, and yet, Sasuke was also there for Naruto as a friend. Uchiha Sasuke, the last surviving member of the Uchiha clan massacre. Uchiha Itachi, an ANBU captain from the Leaf, a member of the Uchiha clan, had murdered the entire Uchiha clan, his own kith and kin, in cold blood. The only known survivor was Uchiha Sasuke, Uchiha Itachi's younger brother. No one knew what had transpired, or what had driven Itachi to commit one of the most brutal acts known to shinobi. Itachi escaped that night, defected from the village, and was consequently named Missing Nin. Again, few years later, Konoha's higher-ups were shaken when intelligence stated that Itachi had entered the ranks of a criminal organization, obscurely called Akatsuki. Apart from this, no information exists pertaining Uchiha Itachi or the Akatsuki. The Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto and Sasuke hadn't known each other well before then. Naruto still remembered the night. It was almost etched into his memory. For the first time, he had actually talked to Sasuke that night. "Hey, are you alright? What's your name?" Two young boys were alone in a deserted alley. One was blonde-haired, currently down on his knees, next to a black-haired boy. The latter seemed to have passed out in the middle of the alley, and was slowly just regaining consciousness. Who are you?" the black-haired boy asked groggily, clutching his head. My name's Naruto. What's yours?" "Naruto." The black-haired boy's vision started swimming again. However, just before blacking out for the second time that night, beside the vague sound of the blonde-haired boy shaking him lightly, he thought he saw an old man in white robes. 5 days had passed since Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno had been united under the banner of Team 7, under Hadate Kakashi. It had started with that mission of catching Tora, the daimyo's wife's cat. What had followed could only be described as pure torture, that is, if you asked Naruto or Sasuke. Team building, as their sensei called it, was something the three genin would soon come to hate. The missions were a mere farce, a cover for the jobs that needed manpower and large amounts of patience. They had each been left with very less time between missions. Also, Kakashi always seemed to disappear after administering the details, something that always frustrated Sakura to no end. Once, to Sakura's disapproval, the two boys had tried skiving off the mission, and that was when they had realized that one couldn't pull the wool under Kakashi Hadake's eyes that easily. All in all, at the end of 15 different routines, the three genin seemed to be prepared for another grind. Kakashi Hadake was grinning. Unknowingly, his three cute students had already laid the stepping stones to working a perfect routine. In fact, Kakashi had never felt more confident in a team before. At first, it had started with anger. His three students had rebuked the contents of the mission. Then, resignation followed. They seemed to accept the fact that these were the missions they would be dealing with. And then, it had happened. It was almost impossible to miss. The flow, the systematic grind of teamwork that Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke were implementing. He didn't know what had happened. Maybe they had talked it out or something. It didn't matter, really. The three of them had somehow worked out a rhythm, and were going according to it. Sasuke seemed to be good at technical analysis, Sakura was ahead in composure and precision, and Naruto was a battery with stamina galore. Somehow, they had worked on those points, and Team 7 had come to life. Odd, he told himself. He never thought he would genuinely be attached to his students. Oh well, he'd been proved wrong before. Maybe this time, maybe this team, just maybe. The SomeDamn Hokage silently observed the three young genin, and their jonin sensei standing in front of him. He cleared his throat, and the three genin looked up. Alright, I am to believe that this genin team has finished exactly 15 D-ranked missions. Damn straight we did. And I'm just about done with catching cats, mending houses, and anything else that. Shuffling into his list of papers, the Hokage withdrew a sheaf. Without pausing, he opened it. Escort mission, Land of the Waves. Objective, to escort the given personnel to Nami no Kuni and aid in transport of the goods carried. Pausing slightly, he looked up and almost broke out into laughter. Naruto, Sasuke, and even Sakura's eyes had lit up with what could only be described as joy. C rank. Team 7, do you think you are up for this? Up for it? Up for it? We were born for this shit. Let me at the mission already. Glancing momentarily at Kakashi, who was hiding a smile behind his ever-present book, the Hokage withdrew a seal and stamped on the sheaf of papers. Approved. Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled inwardly. A simple escort mission to the waves. Naruto would return tomorrow, by which time a certain assassin would have arrived in Konoha. Let me tell you a little story. Hatred is sealed in all of us at the time of birth. This seals that holds hatred back is strong initially. However, hatred is willing to wait. It doesn't show itself during our childhood. I'll bide my time, it says. Later on, however, a small crack seems to appear on the seal for the first time. We have called upon hatred. Hatred smiles wryly while obeying our command. Unknowingly, we have already started hurtling down a path of no return. Time passes, and as we repeatedly summon hatred to our aid for various reasons, the seal weakens. Hatred knows now that it is only a matter of time, and, with a laugh, lends us a portion of its terrible power every time we demand it. And finally, when the seal is greatly damaged, we dare to demand complete power of hatred. With a deafening roar, hatred decimates the seal, and stands in front of us, red eyes and razor-sharp claws, and before we realize our folly, hatred has already swallowed us. Hatred has claimed us for one of its own. Uchiha Madara had laughed, standing in front of the Kyuubi. How would you destroy a man? Given power. 3 young students and their Jounin sensei stood outside the Konohagakure gate. Sasuke had his hands in his pockets and was wearing a glum expression, apparently not all that used to getting up so early. Sakura was shooting glares at Naruto, who looked as though it was the most joy-inducing thought to be outside one's village at 4:30 in the morning. All 3 of them had their backpacks, and Kakashi was buried in his book as though nothing was happening. Sensei, what are we waiting for exactly? Kakashi looked up and simply started walking, followed by Sakura and Sasuke. Geez, aren't we a cheerful team? Uzumaki, keep chattering away and you'll soon have my foot in your face. You just have a stick up your ass. Shut up and keep moving. Not even 2 weeks since Naruto Uzumaki left, and I'm being summoned. Is this a flaw in your plan? What is going on, Sarutobi? Altair Ibn Layahad drew his hood back to enjoy the cool air whipping his face. The sun hadn't risen yet, but Altair was already off, aware of the fact that he had a large distance to cover on foot. And why is this so important? Altair could feel the object bouncing in his robes with a rhythmic beat, and as he sprinted on, a wry smile made its way onto his lips. Somehow it was ironic that he had to pick it back up and use it again, right after he'd sworn not to touch it. Power in the palm of my hands. 3 young genin were staring distastefully at a man staring distastefully at 3 young genin. Kakashi, meanwhile, was paying the closest attention. So, these air kids are my escorts. Sakura crinkled her nose at him, while Naruto was visibly affronted by the way this man had addressed them. These air kids? Yes. Kazuna glared sharply at Kakashi's short reply, apparently expecting more of an explanation as to why important personnel like him had to put up with 3 scruffy kids and a man who seemed to have the personality of a pile of moist mud. Look here, old man. We're supposed to be escorting you, supposedly a bridge builder, to the wave country. It's not exactly our pleasure waking up at insane hours just to escort some senile old geezer who complains far too much. Naruto's declaration had caught the man off guard, but he soon recovered. Well, looks like the kid's got a big mouth. Naruto bared his teeth in reply, although just for a moment. Realizing that arguing with the bridge builder was an exercise in futility, he simply turned away with a snort. Stop wasting your breath, Uzumaki. Let's just get on with this mission. With a shrug, Kakashi started walking forward, followed by a grumbling Tezuna. Sakura was looking partly worn out already. Sasuke and Naruto were the last ones walking, shoulders slumped and all. How about a game, Sasuke-chan? Sasuke turned when the rock hit him square on the neck. Huh? Come on. You know it'll be fun, don't you? Oh, come on, Sasuke-chan. Thwack. As the sun rose, higher and higher toward its zenith, Team 7 and Tezuna, the bridge builder, trudged their way towards Nami no Kuni. The mundane dullness of the mission was seriously starting to affect Naruto and Sasuke, right until... Stop it. Naruto jumped when Sakura turned around and shouted at him. Do you think you're the only one on this mission? Why don't you, for 1 second, act like some duck? Sakura Haruno was cut short of her rebuke when Naruto threw himself on her. Naruto, what the he? To Sakura's utter indignation, Naruto roughly stifled her rebuke with his hand. Alarmed, he scrambled back up, and his eyes widened immediately at the sight. Kakashi was still standing, albeit with a stoic expression on his face now. A man lay beneath him, now a large gash running across his exposed shoulder blade. Blood was starting to gush out. What the bloody hell was that all about? Were we just... Naruto turned. Naruto's breath caught in his throat. He knew that he just had a few milliseconds to react, and he knew that if he didn't, his fate would be far worse than the man lying down. However, he didn't. He couldn't. A thick, sickening sound. He turned. Sasuke Uchiha had reacted, quicker than him. It was quick though, not clean. The second assailant fell, a kunai lodged in his temple. His eyes had rolled upward, and he screamed for just a fraction of a second more before Kakashi brought his foot crashing down on the spot where the kunai was lodged. Sakura screamed in turn, Sasuke panted, looking sharply at him, and Kakashi bent down to wipe the blood off his shoes. Tazuna, meanwhile, had just fainted. Uzumaki, what was that? Where was your reaction? Naruto knew it wasn't a taunt. However superior Sasuke could act, he wouldn't choose to do so now. Naruto could actually sense concern in his voice, though heavily masked. Kakashi, done cleaning his shoes, looked half-heartedly at Tazuna and then at Sakura, who was clutching her mouth tightly. Sakura, get a hold of yourself. Revive Tazuna. Kakashi looked at Naruto. A faster reaction is always an advantage. You've learnt it firsthand now, haven't you? That's all you're going to say. We were nearly killed, and that's your word of advice. That's all is need to be said. Naruto turned sharply, but was immediately silenced by the sight of Kakashi bending down towards one of their assailants. He removed the shawl covering their necks and drew a sudden, sharp breath. The Mist Ninja. What does that mean? And then, just like that, ever so suddenly, it happened. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura hadn't realized it at the time, but they had just initiated a train of events that would have them engage in one of the most dangerous battles of their lives, and meet two men who would change their entire future. Sakura Haruno's usually steady brain was in complete disarray. Two attackers, both quelled by Kakashi, and then this. A heavy mist seemed to have enveloped the entire area. The climate had shifted suddenly from a humid, warm temperature to a dry, cool setting. She could even feel the beads of sweat going cold against her forehead, and her breath had shortened considerably, though she couldn't register if it was because of terror or the mist. Sakura-chan. Sakura looked up, and her heart skipped several beats when she realized that she couldn't even see forward clearly. In fact, she could only vaguely make out that Naruto was standing in front of her, and Tazuna was close to her. Kakashi and Sasuke were invisible, and the mist was shrouding even Naruto's obscure form now. Let's see now, 8 vital spots to be attacked. Liver, lungs, spine, clavicle, neck, head, stomach, heart. It was a peculiar voice, merely a hoarse whisper, but it was almost as if the mist amplified the whisper, and amidst the mist, it served its purpose. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura were frozen, sheer terror running through their veins. And as if to mock them, a laugh seemed to echo. Tazuna shivered wildly next to Sakura, who was rooted to the spot, not showing a hint of movement. What do we have here? Bodyguards for my target. And just like that, the mist cleared to reveal a terrorizing sight. Kakashi was standing with his arms folded, staring at a tall, muscular man with a garment running across his face, effectively covering his mouth. His head was leaning sideways slightly, owing to the presence of an enormous blade swung over the man's shoulder. However, the man's appearance came nowhere near scathing Naruto, not nearly as much as his eyes. To put it simply, the man's eyes had deadened, and it was as if his eyes were replaced by 2 lifeless orbs. The mere sight of how it just stared, soullessly simply terrified the 3 inexperienced genin. Momochi Zabuza, demon of the hidden mist, if I'm not wrong. The 3 students looked up at their sensei. Kakashi simply stood calmly, eyeing the man. His tone was not shaky, nor was it urgent. I see that my reputation precedes me. Although, the same can be said for you, Kakashi of the Sharingan. Kakashi chuckled, much to the surprise of his 3 students and their escort. You have done your homework. Enough idle talk. Kakashi, we both know what I'm here for. Kakashi didn't react, but Naruto immediately registered what was going on. He's here for Tazuna. He was ashamed to admit it, but for a fraction of a second, he was relieved that it wasn't him this person was after. The very thought of going up in battle against him seemed to leaden his motor functions, though only for an instant. There is always a difference between cowardice and quick thinking. Running away without assessing your opponent's strengths is cowardice. However, when the opponent is clearly stronger than you, and unless you have no other choice, a ninja wouldn't take that fight. Naruto gulped, and forced himself to look at Zabuza. Registering the minute movement, the man turned away from Kakashi to look at Naruto. You seem like you want to say something, my young friend. Naruto's heart thumped fiercely. No. Zabuza furrowed his brows in mock questioning. Never. Sakura, Kakashi and Sasuke's heads all turned towards him at the same instant. Sakura's mouth was wide open, and Sasuke was wide-eyed. We're entrusted to escort this man to safety. I will not go back on our mission. Zabuza was still for a short while, and then the shawl around his mouth twitched. He was smiling. How chivalrous. Bravery is always a spectacle to see in one as young as you are. All of them were interrupted by a light swishing sound. Momochi Zabuza ... Do not forget that you are yet to pass me. Your fight is with me and me alone. Kakashi had readied a hand seal, and was staring dead center into Zabuza's eyes. How cute, the sensei protects the students. And just like that, Zabuza brought his right arm swishing down towards Kakashi. Kakashi, unfazed, stepped back deftly, neatly avoiding the attack. Are you ready to die? The fight had begun. Uchiha Sasuke's hands seemed to quiver. This is what a real battle is like. His mouth had gone completely dry, and it was becoming harder to breathe with every passing second. The two shinobi in front of him, talking some time ago, had engaged in battle and the effect was suffocating. It was become progressively harder to follow their movements, and as Kakashi wove around intricately between Zabuza's half-hearted strikes, the forest seemed to resonate with the sounds of the swinging blade. And then it had happened. The two shinobi stopped momentarily and jumped back a few feet. Enough playtime, don't you think, Kakashi? Sasuke's eyes darted toward Naruto and Sakura, standing to his left. Tezuna was behind them, curled up in a fetal position, apparently still unconscious. Naruto's eyes met his, and, oddly enough, the blonde-haired boy didn't convey anything. He just remained blank, rooted to the spot. When Sasuke turned back to Kakashi, he received one of the greatest shocks of his entire life. What? How is that even possible? A Sharingan. Headache. Kakashi allowed himself to get used to the sensation. Pulling his mask down had allowed him to utilize what he was now famous for, the Sharingan given to him by Uchiha Obito. As both his eyes were focused quickly, the familiar buzzing sensation swarmed his face. The Sharingan was ready to go. The left side of his face twitched. He smiled wryly. So, Obito, here I am again, in need of your power. Help me, my friend. Zabuza flexed his left arm and held out his massive sword in a different stance, a two-handed pose. I see. Now things are bound to get interesting, aren't they? Kakashi stared back emotionlessly. Things were looking bad as of now. He was almost sure that Zabuza had more accomplices. The first two were merely baits. Tezuna had fainted, and his three students were obviously shaken. He cursed inwardly. If only I'd been alert and sent them off immediately. But still calm, he looked at Zabuza. Forgive me, demon of the mist, but I assure you, this will be your last battle. The chuckle. Don't be too sure. Without a moment's notice, he sprinted forward. Zabuza seemed to tighten his gait, though only momentarily. A very minute cocking of the shoulders was enough for Kakashi's Sharingan. Top left. The massive blade came crashing down, though only to strike at thin air. Not wasting a moment, whipped out his palm, kunai extended at Zabuza's waist. Not bad at all, Kakashi. You seem to have become too comfortable with the Uchiha Dejutsu. Zabuza proved to be insanely nimble, cleanly dodging Kakashi's kunai strikes. Kakashi replied with another swing, and Zabuza retaliated brilliantly, dodging cleanly yet again, and adjusting his stance to give him enough room to lash out. That sword of yours is too big, isn't it? I don't think so, myself. Angling his strike obliquely this time, Kakashi was caught by surprise. For a heart-stopping split second, the sword seemed to have met its mark, cutting clean through Kakashi's stomach. Sakura screamed, and Naruto drew a breath in sharply. It only lasted a second though. Kakashi's cleaved body was suddenly replaced by a puff of smoke, which cleared to reveal a log. Zabuza sighed as Kakashi jumped down from the tree. Chawarimi, body replacement can come in very handy, you know. Leaping back, Kakashi smiled at Zabuza. And now, it's my turn. Tsuryuden no Jutsu. Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke turned to see the water surrounding the land they were on rise in a majestic display of ninjutsu. One that they wouldn't forget for many years to come. Sakura's eyes widened and her heart almost stopped beating when she witnessed the water take the place of a huge, roaring dragon. Kakashi-sensei knows jutsu like these. She suddenly snapped her head back to Zabuza when she heard him laugh. Copy ninja Kakashi, you realize, don't you, that your jutsu are only what you claim to be. Copies. And to the three students' utter terror, an enormous water dragon rose from Zabuza's side, one that would rival Kakashi's. The genin could do nothing but watch as the two shinobi's respective behemoths clashed together in a stupendous contest of ninjutsu prowess. The noise was deafening. Kakashi stood calmly on one side, tilting his head and muttering words to himself as his water dragon threatened to down Zabuza's. Zabuza, on the other side, watched as Kakashi's dragon curled around his and squeezed. What say Zabuza, who seems to be the paler copy? It was a sight that three genin had never witnessed. Their calm, collected sensei was suddenly mocking and taunting, a demeanor THQT sent shivers of discomfort. Instead of the usual lopsided smile that Kakashi wore, his face was now sporting a twisted scowl, and his eyebrows were furrowed. Naruto's eyes followed Zabuza as he turned, and his expression deepened. You dare mock me? Yes, I dare. You shouldn't have. Kakashi's smile vanished when he saw the seal Zabuza manifested. Mizubanshin no Jutsu. To the three students' horror, another Zabuza stood next to Zabuza, and out of nowhere, the original caster dispelled the hand seal, rushing forward. For a fraction of a second, the water froze mid-air and dropped to the ground, but it immediately resumed its form when the seal was taken up by Zabuza's clone. What now? Copy ninja. What now? Simultaneously, Zabuza's dragon vanquished Kakashi's, and Zabuza moved his blade forward in one fluid motion, going straight for Kakashi. Now, you die. The terrifying sound of an impending death blow closed in on headache Kakashi, and yet he remained calm, even in the very face of death. It was simple, so much simpler than he had envisaged. Chidori. To Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura, it all happened like a blur. 1 second, Kakashi was about to be cleaved neatly in two. The next second, his palm, holding a brilliant blue ball of pulsating lightning, was emerging out of a chest. Mamachi Zabuza's chest. Devious little ninja, aren't you? Kakashi headache. Kakashi's stare bored into the back of Zabuza's eyes. It was a sight to behold. Kakashi headache stood, raising Mamachi Zabuza by his neck with one hand, the other hand passing through a huge bloody wound across his chest. Pulsating lightning still sustaining at the very end. I assured you, did I not? Zabuza's body was twitching regularly with every passing second. He seemed to be shivering. Why yes, you did. Kakashi still looked right into Zabuza's eyes. A slow smile made its way onto Kakashi's face. So you accept defeat? You know, headache Kakashi, the only thing that's been running through my mind ever since I met you. Zabuza's smile slowly mimicked the one on Kakashi's face. Drawing a shuddering breath, Zabuza bit down on his lips. You really are a cocky little bastard, aren't you? For a second, it seemed as though Kakashi's grip had loosened on the man in front of him. Only for a second, though. For the very next second, it all happened simultaneously. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock. Zabuza's body burst into a mass of water in front of him, and Mamachi Zabuza slashed a deep gash across Haruno Sakura's shoulder. What? How can how can a clone bleed? Naruto turned only a few seconds later to realize that Zabuza had played them, to realize that Zabuza had targeted them, to realize Kakashi had erred. However, the fact that Zabuza Mamachi had killed Sakura Haruno only registered a few seconds late. Tut, so much blood. Where was your Sharingan, Kakashi? You should have detected me. Sasuke screamed, and Zabuza simply stood, hunched over Sakura's violently spasming body. He turned and fixed Naruto with a stare. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Sometimes you can cause enough pain to override normal actions. She's in pain, alright. Now, you next, my brave man. Naruto looked back into his eyes, devoid of thought, hidden at first like blood on a rose. Wicked demon, your eyes stay closed. The assassin known as Altair somehow sensed the object inside his robes twitch minimally. But then, with time, the petals fall. Nothing is hidden, nothing at all. Wicked demon opens its eyes. A flash of red, a feral cry. Hidden at first like blood on a rose. Wicked demon, the end is close. I'm really starting to like this. The wind had stopped completely all of a sudden, and from atop his perch, a man jumped down lithely, as if he'd been doing it all his life. Ezio Auditor forced himself to tear his eyes away from the battle in front of him to inspect his artifact, which, if he wasn't wrong, had just twitched. Saw Sakura-chan. She could barely hear him. She tried to focus, to concentrate, so that she could hear Uzumaki Naruto speak. But she wasn't able to. An iron fist seemed to clamp down on her lungs, pushing it back, compressing it. 1 second, she was standing, fear running through her like venom. The very next second, a white-hot slash of pain, utter and absolute pain, and then it seemed to slowly recede. She felt herself becoming light. Sakura-chan. She tried to turn her head, wishing somehow that this action would restore her vision. Sakura-chan. Don't. Duh. She gasped, and she vaguely felt blood spurting out of her mouth and hitting her chin. Where had it gone wrong? This was supposed to be their first good mission. They had all been eager, so eager about doing this mission. They had had it all worked out. She was even staring to like their usually dull and boring old sensei. It was all going so well. Where had it slipped? Inside her head, it was a whirlwind of thoughts. It was as if a film was playing, although in slow motion. She saw her mother and father running up to her, scooping her and consoling her as she cried about a bruised ankle. She saw loads of boys passing snide remarks about her forehead. She saw Ino give her a headband, a pink one, to match with her hair. She saw Sasuke walking out of his house with his hands tucked away in his pockets. She saw Iruka-sensei screaming at the other students for not studying for the test. She saw Naruto, ever smiling and shouting about the Hokage. And out of nowhere, all those sensations smashed into one. The feeling of raw joy snowballed into one with the depths of sorrow, and it was too much for her. Her lips started to tremble, and cold was gripping her, slowly yet surely. She could sense her heart waging a losing battle. And then, it closed in on her, that terrifying realization that this was it, the end of the road, and with nowhere left to go, she was going to die. She cried. And finally, she saw a flash of white robes. An angel. With a sharp crackling sound, her world exploded in a shower of gold. Ezio Auditor stood still. He closed his eyes and opened them. Everything went black for a second, but only to be re-illuminated in unnatural shades of black and blue. There stood the enemy, illuminated in red, and two targets, illuminated in gold. One lying down and one standing. And although Ezio noticed it really late, there was another one. And had he seen it immediately, he would have seen a figure illuminated in bright white. Ezio Auditor wasn't taken aback when the two men had clashed. One man, presumably the teacher of his 3 students, had gone up against the other. Ezio had caught snatches of words like demon and mist. Neither was he taken aback when the blonde-haired young boy had lost all semblances of speech right after the enemy had tricked their teacher, only to inflict a fatal wound on the girl. The boy had quite simply receded into his own shell, understandable, due to the shock. He wasn't taken aback when the other boy, his friend, had leapt in an attempt to kill their enemy, only to be thrown back with bone-shattering force. And that was when it had started to happen. The blonde-haired young boy had screamed. Ezio Auditor had heard plenty of people scream. He himself was the cause of a great many of them. Screams of pain, screams of anguish, screams of agony, screams of fear, screams of rage. But this was not any of those. This was the scream of something inhuman, something that had awakened from its slumber, ready to maul, to strike, to maim, to kill. And as the scream reverberated throughout the island, Ezio Auditor felt the object twitch. He knew not whether it was a response or a coincidence. The scream grew in intensity, and Ezio could start to feel it change. It was continuous, like a wall of sound heading towards you and you alone, and it was changing. The scream was becoming more primal, more beast-like. Subconsciously, Ezio's pulse quickened. His breath started growing shallower, and to his consternation, his right hand seemed to tremble. What is happening? Who is that boy? What is he? And amidst all of that, amidst the screaming, Ezio Auditor turned, as a flash of bright white caught his attention. Ezio's breath stopped in his throat and his heart seemed to stop beating for just a second. The man in the portrait, the screaming ceased. For a second, it had seemed as though not only him, but the entire forest too was screaming aloud, in unison with his scream. He fell to his knees. It seemed to originate out of nowhere, it had no source, and yet, it came from everywhere. It was soothing, calming. It was only a whisper, but Naruto could hear it distinctly. A soft voice, singing a lilting tune, hidden at first like blood on a rose. Let me tell you a little story. Hatred is sealed in all of us at time of birth. This seals that holds hatred back is strong. Initially, Naruto didn't know why, but the tune soothed him. It was like balm to a searing wound, and Naruto couldn't help but smile as the warmth spread throughout his body. Wicked demon, your eyes stay closed. However, hatred is willing to wait. It doesn't show itself in our childhood. I'll bide my time, it says. Later on, however, a small crack seems to appear on the seal for the first time. We have called upon hatred for the first time. Naruto stared back up at the behemoth in front of him. He looked into its eyes, and it seemed to smile back at him, welcoming him, enveloping him in its warm embrace. And then, with time, the petals fall. Hatred smiles wryly while obeying our command. Unknowingly, we have already started hurtling down a path of no return. Naruto didn't flinch. He stared right back at the fox. The smile seemed to vanish, to be replaced by a snarling maw, teeth bared and ready to rip apart anyone who dared to stand in front of it, to resist its terrifying power. Nothing is hidden, nothing at all. Time passes, and as we repeatedly summon hatred to our aid for various reasons, the seal weakens. Hatred knows that. Now, it is only a matter of time, and, with a laugh, lends us a portion of its terrible power every time we demand it. Sakura-chan, killed, just like that by that man. Naruto forgot his fears when he looked back into the eyes of the Fox of Nine Tails. It all didn't matter, really. It didn't make even a shred of difference. All that mattered was him and his hatred, his desire, his right to kill Momochi Zabuza, to make the man writhe about on the ground in utter pain and make him wallow in self-pity like the vermin he was. Wicked demon opens its eyes. And finally, when the seal is greatly damaged, we dare to demand complete power of hatred. Naruto didn't say a word when the beast willingly bent his head in front of him, and suddenly, blood-red chakra started to siphon into his body. Wicked demon, a feral cry. And so, with a deafening roar, hatred decimates the seal, and stands in front of us, red eyes and razor-sharp claws, and before we realize our folly, hatred has already swallowed us. Naruto's entire body tensed, resisting, revolting against the foreign chakra that was slowly taking over his body. It made its way through his senses, steadily overthrowing them. He was filled with elation. He felt blood dribble down from his jaw. His body started to shake, hidden at first like blood on a rose. Wicked demon, the end is close. Hatred has claimed us for one of its own. Ezio Auditor had only seen portraits. Of course, there was also that statue, deep underground, beneath his old villa at Monterigini, but he'd never cared to observe it that much. There was no mistaking it. He'd studied that portrait for so many years. The man in the portrait had been some sort hero in his childhood. No, not the type you want to be like or identify with, for he didn't know anything about the man. All he knew was the same stoic expression with which he'd always looked back at him, unblinking, unwavering. And in Ezio's mind, he would visualize him making his way over the cold, gray rooftops, off to kill some treacherous old Templar, and smile. By age 20, Ezio Auditor had grown into a strapping young man, with his head full of ideas of revenge and killing. And then, much later, Ezio Auditor would step right back into the shoes of the very man whose portrait he'd observed for hours on end. He relived the man's memories, in a search, a quest for the artifact, a race against time with the Templars. Now, tossed into a different timeline, the revelation dawned upon Ezio, slowly yet steadily. The man out in the clearing, who'd just stepped in, catching him, Ezio completely unawares, was none other than the very same man in the portrait. Neo Dio, Master Altair. Without himself knowing it, Ezio Auditor was smiling. He closed his eyes. It mattered not. This was all informed, all foreseen. Altair Ibn Lai had opened his eyes to the sight in front of him. The pink-haired girl was lying beneath his feet, and it didn't take years of mastery of the ways of the assassins to tell that she was already gone, beyond reach. And right there, in front of him, his back turned to him, stood Uzumaki Naruto. This was only the second ever time Altair was witnessing something that shook his heart, his resolve. The first had been when the teacher, Al-Mualim, had succumbed to the power of the apple. The whole next battle, Altair could never recall upon the memory clearly again. Perhaps it was the fact that he had truly looked up to the man, the very man who was standing in front of him, dressed in the same black robes, face adorning the same smile. Only that time, his mentor was housing the desire to kill the very assassin whom he had raised in his lap with such care and affection. Al-Mualim was intent on killing Altair, and now, this event shook him in a way not different from way back then. The very same feeling that made him want to fall to his knees and stay that way for the rest of eternity. Altair walked forward. The very same feeling that commanded his resolve to buckle, yet he walked. He stopped when he was a fair distance from the boy. I don't know the meaning of this, Sarutobi. He closed his eyes and steadied his voice. Assassin, I know not why you hesitate, but now would be an opportune moment to reveal yourself. Altair nodded inwardly as the assassin who'd thought he was well hidden came out from between the trees. Just as Altair had hoped, the man behind the tree covers, convinced he was well hidden, walked out. Altair barely had the time to study him. Tall, moderately well-built, and the walk of someone who had practiced stealth for a very good number of years were obvious. There was no mistaking it. It was the robes of the assassin that the man was wearing, albeit it looked a bit complicated. However, Altair was struck by the man's confidence. There was no doubt, this assassin, or at least he hoped he was certainly not your ordinary assassin. It was as if the hooded man was expecting this. The assassin walked forward, close enough for Altair to see his beard under the hood. Stopping short, he inclined his head to the right calmly, as though he was used to this happening every day. What do you suggest, Master Altair? Altair knew not how this assassin knew of him, but he was forced to put that to the back of his mind for the present. Explanations could wait. He himself was waiting for one on the part of Sarutobi. The artifact. The assassin drew the apple of Eden from within his robes, just as Altair knew he would. However, what Altair wasn't expecting was his own artifact to start glowing, in resonance with the other assassins. Both of them looked at each other. It was evident that neither of them knew what was happening. Curse you, Sarutobi, the next time I do something for you will only be after I have received a more than satisfactory explanation. Excuse-me, but do you know what is? With a loud, resounding crack, the two pieces simultaneously exploded. The world was engulfed momentarily in a brilliant shower of gold. Only momentarily though. Altair was thrown back with shattering force, and as he landed a few feet away, he could see the other assassin get knocked off too. What in the name? Suddenly the vision in front of him faded. The forest, the trees, the water, it all just receded. Instead, he was in a rather strange place. His vision blurred as he shook his head. He was winded and found that he was panting hard for no reason at all. He closed his eyes and opened them again. It was still the same vision. There was just emptiness everywhere. There was no floor, nor was there a ceiling, no sky or clouds, no surroundings, just empty, blank space everywhere and nowhere all at once. Still lying down, he tried to refocus his eyes once again. He suddenly heard the sound of a throat being cleared. He looked up, his brows furrowed. Obviously, this was the piece's doing. He was not completely foreign to this feeling. Of course, the first time Al-Mualim had triggered it had had a far greater effect on him. This time, however, was different. There were two of them, and they'd both been pulled into this illusion. Or was it only one of them in the illusion, and the other? Here, you look like you need help, master. His vision cleared to reveal the man standing in front of him. Altair looked up, to see that the man's hood was no longer drawn to reveal a youthful, somewhat elegantly carved face. His keen observation didn't miss the scar across the man's lips, and with a jolt, Altair realized that it was the exact same scar that was on his visage too. The man outstretched his arm, prompting him to grab hold and get up. Ezio Auditor da Firens. Altair assumed that the man was telling him his name. It was the closest excuse to what sounded like a load of gibberish. Altair, I don't believe we have met each other before. In hindsight, Altair knew his reply had been curt, but it didn't matter at that moment. Ignoring the man's hand, Altair got up and dusted his robes. Without a second look at the man, Altair stepped forward gingerly. His foot was still steady. Shaking his head, he started walking forward. That happens to be the wrong way, master. They are this way. Altair turned round sharply. They are this way. He jumped ever so slightly when he found Uzumaki Naruto and the pink-haired girl, whom he'd thought beyond reach, lying down, eyes closed with an expression of peace adorning their young faces. Altair felt a weight drop into his stomach. Did he know? This assassin he knows something, doesn't he? Altair blinked, and it happened very suddenly. Kill him. Altair's movements were quick and his technique flawless. Reaching forward, he withdrew his hidden blade and turned, and in one fluid motion, his hands snapped down under the man's neck. Tell me what you know, asses. But before Altair could complete his threat, what he'd thought was a perfect strike was parried with nearly the same perfection. Two hidden blades kissed and pulled back, and again and again and again, Ezio slowly being pushed into a corner. Ezio Auditor didn't even flinch as the master threw all he could at him. His face was even, the smile gone, the hood drawn. Ezio Auditor, by a cruel quirk of fate, was up against Altair ibn Lahad. It had happened within a fraction of a second. He barely had time to think, to process what was going on. And yet, he was Ezio Auditor after all. This is no time to think, Ezio. Every single strike was dodged, and Ezio never stepped forward, never retaliated, and yet was neither scathed nor surprised. He only had a vague idea as to why this was happening. And if he was right, retaliating was futile. The only way out. Ezio always possessed uncanny reflexes, and even with those reflexes, for a second, Altair had seemed to move with unnatural speed. And after that, he seemed to move with a near-savage approach, almost inhuman. Altair slashed recklessly. He didn't know why, he couldn't even come close to explaining it. This sensation, it felt vaguely familiar, and yet it didn't seem to matter. He needed to kill this man. Kill him, and wipe away that knowing smile, make him suffer. So be it, then, I shall kill him. Altair couldn't explain it, but the very moment that thought had crossed his mind, something snapped and seemed to break apart and shatter into a million pieces. Suddenly, it was as if the entire world around him was moving in slow motion. So be it, then, I shall kill him. So be it, then, I shall kill him. It was the very same phrase, those very words Al-Mualim had used right before they had engaged in battle, and now, Altair stopped short, with an electrifying shock running through his veins. Hands seemed to stop moving, and his heartbeat slowly thudded to normal. His blade receded, and so did his newfound vigor. Of course, the mere enormity, the gross stupidity of his actions suddenly struck Altair ibn Lahad like a thunderbolt. It was like a moment of revelation. Suddenly, he imagined himself fighting this man, clearly an assassin, someone who wasn't even his enemy. How could he have decided that this man needed to die? What was he doing? He was Altair ibn Lahad, the very man who'd taken his creed to the pinnacle, the very top. How could he have acted so foolishly? It was all so clear. And with that thought running through his mind, Altair ibn Lahad finally did something that he never would have dreamed of doing, something that he hadn't done for a long time. Maybe it was still his arrogance, but Altair didn't care. He bowed. My apologies, assassin. Ezio, you said. Altair didn't care, the clarity now soothing his insides. Maybe it was his arrogance, or maybe it was the peace that led him astray, but time had taught him that he still had much to learn. It's glad to have you back, master. Now, shall we? Ezio Auditor stood by calmly as Altair walked forward and stooped, lifted Naruto in his arms and laid him over his shoulder. Following his lead, he picked the unconscious girl up lightly and placed her above his shoulder and turned towards Altair. For a moment, there was silence. What do we do now, assassin? Ezio stared back at him blankly. You're supposed to be the master here. Altair raised his brow. You tell me you do not know a way out of here. No more than you seem to, master. I would suggest you stop calling me that until I beat you in a bout, assassin. Ah, what's this? Sudden respect for me. Suddenly, just like the forest had faded some time back, Altair could sense his vision fading again. The world. This vision was breaking apart, and Altair knew they were returning. But more importantly, he knew for a fact that it was certainly not this man behind this trick. Somehow, assassin, I have a feeling this is not the first time you will irk me. And as it all crashed in, converging at one point, Ezio laughed, and his laugh echoed back at him. It was strange, really. In his childhood, this man had been this mental image of the ideal assassin. The untouchable man, in terms of technique, style, and knowledge. And now, here he was, holding entire conversations with him, even engaging in battle against him. But Ezio had already convinced himself that nothing was ever straightforward. The very manner of his entrance into this timeline was, for instance, a topic of extreme ambiguity, and he had decided that, instead of questioning, he would discover. Ezio could immediately sense that Altair ibn Laia had, for a short while, come under the alluring influence of the apple. There was no mistaking it. Those eyes, usually calm and unyielding, had suddenly changed. For that moment, Ezio hadn't looked into the eyes of the master. He hadn't fought with Altair, the son of no one. No, it was something far more sinister that had acted back then, that had taken control of the legendary assassin. And Ezio was amazed to see the master break out of it so quickly. He didn't know what had prompted him to do so. Of course, he didn't know a lot of things. But now, he knew a little more than before. He knew, for instance, that Altair ibn Laia had possessed every bit the charisma that he had imagined the man in the portrait to possess. Thud. Uchiha Sasuke opened his eyes and closed them again. Swallowing, he tried again. This time, he could keep them open, although his visibility was laughable at best. He tried to heave forward. A short, sharp pain shot through his legs. He gasped, "No, get up, get up. Fool, stand up. Stand up now." And Uchiha Sasuke stood. It was agony. It was as if every nerve in his body was revolting against his actions. Invisible knives tore through his chest, arms, and legs. Yet, he wouldn't be denied. He stepped forward. Is this it? The end? He couldn't keep up for long. Knees buckling, he felt himself hit the ground. And again, he got up. It was like a nightmare. He couldn't. The same feeling. The same sensation of your life being sucked out of you. The very air being drawn from your being, against your own will. That night, Itachi Sakura, killed by the enemy. And then, something had happened. Something ... evil. Naruto had entered some kind of trance, some sort of transition state. Zabuza had, at first, completely ignored it, and he, Sasuke, had, in a frenzy, gone up against him. It was as if he'd been possessed at that point. Zabuza was the enemy, he had to be killed. There wasn't any other way, was there? And then, Kakashi had joined him. Both of them, it was decisive. Zabuza, up against two infuriated ninja, both aiming to kill, and naught else. He didn't know when Kakashi had lost control. He'd just come in, and the sight was a terrifying one. Sharing and blazing in full fury, Sasuke had felt just a touch of elation to be fighting alongside him. To fight with a crazed expression on your face, alongside a man with the same, for both of you to have just one aim. And they had fallen, not just him and Kakashi, but all three of them. Blasted apart, by something he didn't know. All of them flew apart in different directions. And right before he had collided with a sickening crunch against the ground, he thought he'd heard something roar ... or was it howl? Sasuke walked forward. He didn't stop, not even when he felt his knees buckle for the 9th, 10th, 11th time. He still walked. He had to. He had to make sure Naruto was all right, and whatever it was that had rendered them broken hadn't killed him. And as he stumbled the final time, he felt his chin hit the battle-worn terrain. With a sinking feeling, he realized that he wouldn't be getting up. It was strange. He wanted to. He had to, and yet he couldn't. Uchiha Sasuke closed his eyes. He couldn't open them again. Pathetic. Something warm was pressed up against him. Uchiha Sasuke twitched. This feels like a clue. What? What is he telling? Who is he? Wake up. Sasuke tried lifting his head. To his enormous surprise, he realized he could do so easily. He got up, shaking his head. The darkness faded, revealing bright light. Brightness. Two men dressed in the most flawless set of white robes he'd happened upon. Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura and Kakashi Hadake. His two friends were lying down, with absolutely no scars on their body. His stomach erupted when he saw Sakura breathing, albeit unconsciously, and Naruto was alright. Kakashi was sitting up, holding his almost painfully, with a politely quizzical expression on his face, and in the far distance, he could see Momochi Zabuza, injured and certainly the worse for wear. I see that our young friend has woken up. He turned when he saw the taller of the two men speak with a bright, brisk tone and an extremely heavy accent. Dilngirno. Uchiha Sasuke swallowed twice and looked at Kakashi. He was still shaking his head, making sure he wasn't hallucinating. Two voices spoke, one of them his, bewildered and confused, and one Kakashi's, sharp and curt. Who are you? We are. The shorter man with the startling gray eyes opened his mouth to speak, but closed it with a disapproving frown when he was interrupted, almost rudely by his companion. Ezio Auditor and Altair. Something to do with a bird, was it? When Kakashi opened his mouth in uncertainty, the taller man, Ezio, clarified, sensing his lack of understanding. Only the most interesting men in your life. Do it. Altair faltered. Was Abbas mad? Abbas, that's not a good idea at all. If Baba were to hear of this, Abbas's raised eyebrow was enough to convince Altair. Abbas would never let him hear the end of it. But this was a cheap shot, below the belt. To confess his love to the commander's daughter was, well, a cheap shot, an unfair challenge, to the 14-year-old Altair. The air seemed to pick up a bit of cold, heralding the onset of dusk, and Abbas nudged him forward. The problem was, not only the two of them, but the entire group of friends would be watching Altair's heartfelt confession to Sana Seher, Iqbal Seher's daughter. Altair turned around accusingly, only to realize that most of the other boys were hidden, and waiting for him to make good on his end of the bargain. And so, praying to the gods that nothing much would come out of this silly issue, Altair stepped forward boldly, stopping the young girl in her tracks by clearing his throat. Sana Seher turned around and jumped when she saw Altair standing behind her. What is it, Altair? The lights were slowly beginning to fade, and the torches were presently being lit, with the usual smell of burning fuel. And yet, Altair could clearly sense that the girl was blushing, and the tone of her voice made him uncomfortable. The girl was still waiting, looking at him eagerly. If Iqbal or Abba don't kill me for this, I'll make sure I do it myself. You see, The girl seemed to get even more excited, sensing what was coming, though Altair knew not how. It happened so suddenly even Altair was caught unawares. With a delighted shriek, Sana Seher threw herself with such force at Altair that he was knocked clear back, and they both landed on the ground with a bump. Altair blinked rapidly several times. He thought he heard a few derisive snorts of laughter from behind the buildings, but of course, that took second priority over the fact that he was lying in the middle of the Masyaf courtyard, locked in a tight embrace administered by none other than the commander's daughter, Sana. There was silence after that though. They seemed to remain in that position for quite some time. Feeling the need to break free, Altair patted her back gently, her head still nestled firmly on his shoulder. Sana, I love you too. The words seemed to tumble out of her mouth. Altair couldn't really blame the girl. He was Altair ibn Lahad, only one of the most talented and gifted young men to be born into the order. He was not tall, hulky or aggressive, yet he was just the right height, lean, muscular and gave off the hands-off feeling to everyone watching him. Of course, he hadn't had much contact with this girl. Sure, most of the boys talked about her dreamily, but Altair suspected that was because she was Iqbal's daughter. They were going to serve him one day anyway, so why not marry his daughter? Altair was never one to think that way. In fact, to say the very least, he was disgusted by the boot-licking attitude that some of the boys displayed. It struck him now, the foolishness of his action. To confess one's love, here, to another, in their culture, in their society, was to marry in effect. And he wasn't oblivious, ever observant. He wasn't impervious to the glances that he received from the opposite gender after he'd reached the age of 13. Much to the envy of his friends, they would giggle whenever he would walk past, and point, and giggle some more. Altair had paid no heed to all of that, though. His father was one thing. Put a damn toe out of line, and it would mean sore calf and pectoral muscles for the coming week. His father ensured that there was only one goal in his mind, to rise to the top. That was it. Altair didn't reply to the girl's confession. He couldn't explain it, but a lump formed in his throat when he realized that this girl was actually confessing her love for him. With a sudden jolt, she disentangled herself from him. He too got up quickly and observed the intricate textures on the walls behind Sana Seher. "So, I'll see you." She smiled at him sweetly before turning and walking past, a spring in her step that was absent before he'd confronted her. And Altair still stood there, replaying the scene over and over again in his mind. Vaguely, he realized that the boys must have left, sensing the awkward moment they had created. But that was only at the back of his mind. The only thought going through Altair's head was how stupid he'd been, not noticing Sana Seher's extremely pretty face, and the way it magically became even prettier when she smiled. 2 months later, Altair's jaw trembled. With a great heave, he spewed out the contents of his breakfast. "No, no, no, it's a dream. It's a dream. Wake up, wake up. Let me out of here." He fell to his knees. Without his knowledge, the tears came streaming down. They hit the hot, groveling sand before being swallowed by the dust. "Bah!" He retched and vomited again. He felt weak, nauseated by the sight in front of him. Those dark, beetle-black eyes that would always be so alert, so observant, and sometimes so fear-inducing were no longer what they were. Instead, they were rolled upwards and unseeing. Those arms, with which Umar ibn Lahad had taught his son how exactly to poise his body before leaping, were no longer their strong, powerful selves. Instead they lay limp, lifeless, worn out, bloody and broken. Umar ibn Lahad's body hung, battered and lifeless, his neck suspended from the noose, and only his son was weeping in front of him, down on his knees and beating the ground in despair in the hope that it would somehow bring his father back to life, that somehow his father would appear beside him, reprimand him for wasting his time and have him run throughout the evening. But it wasn't to be. A long time later, Altair didn't know how long he'd been there, beating the ground. His knuckles were bloody and he suspected that his right wrist had broken. He felt a soft pair of hands embrace him and hold him close, and he wept into her chest as she held back her sobs too. "He's gone, Sana. He's left me too. They've left me." He didn't know how it had happened. Sure, there had been an ambush, but at Masyaf, ambushes like these by the Templars were merely a training ritual for the Greenhorns. There was absolutely no way it could have collected this much momentum. But then again, there was always that niggling possibility that somehow, somewhere, a traitor had sold them out, had taken money for honor. "You bastards. You cursed sons of bitches." Altair didn't know why he was screaming, or specifically who he was screaming out. He'd stood up, terrifying his companion. You, Ibn el-Menteke. MF, all of you." Altair didn't know when he stopped screaming. It was probably when he felt a warm pair of lips press urgently against his own, silencing him. And he stood there, devoid of all thoughts, just holding on to that one feeling, the feeling that mattered most to him. That night, Altair never slept. He didn't cry, he didn't despair. He just lay there, arms over his head, simply existing. With a loud sound, his door crashed open. Altair sat up hurriedly only to see Abaz's father walk in with a very far-off expression. "Stop. Do not open your mouth, Altair. Simply listen to this broken man's confession." And Altair listened as Abaz's father, Umar ibn Lahad's right-hand man, described exactly how he'd sold out his home and how his captain, Altair's father, had meant everything to him and how he never meant for it to turn out this way. And Altair never moved a single muscle. When Abaz's father came close and hugged him, wept for a second. Altair didn't respond when he dazedly walked over to the window. "Beautiful, isn't it? Masyaf is the most wonderful place to call home, my son." The sun was just rising, and the clouds were parting. From Altair's window you could see the entire town, and the serene beauty it exhibited was indeed exhilarating to witness. And yet, Altair sat, unmoved. Altair didn't even turn. Not even when he heard the glass shatter, not even when he realized that his father's lieutenant had thrown himself to his death. It was only some time after the commotion became evident did Altair lean out of his window and saw the man's body. Altair ibn Lahad smiled. After that, time seemed to fly. For the first time, he asked to fight with real swords against Abaz. For the first time, he wounded his best friend. And when he was sitting alone, when Abaz came up angrily to ask him what the reason was, and that he was drained enough with his father's death, Altair told him. He relished in Abaz's changing emotions. First disbelief, then surprise, shock, then anger. "Why didn't you stop him?" Altair got up, eyes blazing. "Stop him," he said, calmly, pure venom coating his voice. He pushed Abaz. Not expecting it, Abaz fell back and let out a scream, as Altair stamped the very place he'd wounded earlier and walked off. The next day, Altair was made an assassin, and Abaz was withheld due to a shattered right arm. When Al-Mualim had finally given him the hidden blade, Altair went through the formal ceremony. His ring finger was removed, and the hidden blade was attached to his wrist. When he walked out, his friends surrounded him, jostling one another to have a look at their star student's legendary weapon. Nobody noticed Abba's spitting at Altair. Nobody noticed Altair sneering back at him either. In the coming months, Altair became what only he himself could describe as a monster. He'd underwent a huge transformation. Gone were the smiles, gone were the teasing, gone was his self. He'd even fought with Sana at one point. She'd slapped him, called him a monster, and yet he'd replied with that same sneer Abba's had received that day. He watched on disgustedly as Sana Seher got married. She didn't even turn to look at him, not once during the entire ceremony. He'd walked out long before the end. "I'm married to my life," he told himself firmly. He would strive hard to become perfect, and he would protect Al-Mualim at all costs. It hit Altair like a thunderbolt. He stood, stock still, not moving a muscle as the thought finally struck home. Yes, Al-Mualim was a traitor all along, a Templar. Al-Mualim, the very man he'd idolized, served, protected, guarded for so many years, and, in fact, his reason for living was a lie. A lie. All lies. He roared, before striking, before coaxing the life out of his mentor. He looked into his eyes and saw nothing. And then it happened. For the second time in his life, Altair ibn Lahad's personality underwent a massive change. The events to follow were responsible for it, he supposed. The crowd outside the Masyaf fort had roared when he walked out calmly, with Al-Mualim's body slung over his shoulder. He ignored all the stones they threw at him. It didn't matter. Only a few of his trusted accomplices knew of what had transpired between him and the teacher, and those assassins held the crowd back, calming them. He'd stood on top of the Masyaf tower with the apple of Eden in his hand, and he'd talked. He told them his entire story, the story of how he'd transformed into a monster, a man unfit to be called one, and then how he'd learnt, how he'd uncovered the truth behind Mualim and his nefarious plan. And when Altair ibn Lahad had spoken, they listened. For they were not seeing a man broken beyond repair, they were seeing a man reborn, a man fit to be a great leader, and most importantly, a man who could handle power when given to him. The moment he'd finished talking, the crowd had roared again. It was unanimous, there was no questioning it. Altair ibn Lahad became the new leader of the assassin order. Abbas had walked up to him and had broken down, enveloping him in a firm brotherly embrace. And Altair had broken down too, for there was nothing else to do. Years of friendship lost, maybe they could never be regained. But here he was and here was Abbas, ever the friends they had been in their childhood. But that was not the only change Altair had to go through. He'd met Maria Thorpe, a Templar. On his last mission for Al-Mualim, he had been ordered to kill Robert de Sable, and he had, or so he'd thought. When he finally caught the Templar, to his surprise, it had been, of all things, a woman. Robert had employed clever trickery to escape his clutches, but if Altair wanted someone dead, they died. And true to his word, he ended up killing the Templar, only to realize the terrifying truth about his mentor. And what of the woman? Altair could never come close to explaining it. It was, on all accounts, an improbability. He'd taken her captive, and of all the monstrosities that could take place, he'd fallen in love with her. At first, their relationship was borderline homicidal in nature. As Maria Thorpe so cordially put it, she would have liked nothing better than to kill him in the most painful manner possible. They always had these short, sharp conversations on the way to Limassol. She'd always try escaping, but Altair would nip her plans right in the bud. Soon it had become an everyday routine. And then, one day she had actually given him the slip. She had escaped, and for one heart-stopping moment, Altair thought he'd lost her. But he'd recollected himself immediately. He had only one goal in mind, retrieve Maria. Weaving through the Templar's nest fearlessly, he made his way to the top of the Templar hold. No guard ever saw Altair ibn Lahad, and any guard who did was soon dead. Altair was clean, quick and precise, and with no effort at all, he was at his destination. The sight he then witnessed stirred something within him. It sickened him, it screamed at him to interfere, to put a stop to it. Maria Thorpe, though a Templar by all means, Robert de Sable's fiancée, was being pushed into a corner by Robert's successor, his nephew. He realized that she was no longer welcome there anymore, and being away for so long, as captive at his hands, had labeled her a traitor. He leapt in, with all the quietness of a shadow. Nicholas de Sable never knew what hit him. Before he could respond, Altair had already killed him, with no more effort than swatting away a fly. He looked up. Maria was weeping. She had received the shock of her life. Evidently, she had been planning on this, banking on this one relationship to restore herself, and that was gone. Nicholas had succumbed to power and had immediately opposed Maria. The situation had escalated, and to her horror, Maria had found that Nicholas would kill her. It came as a huge shock. She had seen Nicholas as a young boy, had played with him, had shown him how to wield a sword, had been everything short of a mother to him. Altair didn't say a word. He walked forward, carried the weeping Maria, and leaped out. Nobody had seen them, and it was only much later that the news of Nicholas the Sable's mysterious death shook the Templars' ranks. That night, neither of them talked. Altair didn't bind Maria to chains as he always did, but instead, he let her free. He didn't know why he did it. A few years back, he would have clapped her in even tighter chains, and maybe even threatened her. But now, Altair had changed. Gone were those dark shadows hiding beneath his eyes. Gone was the constant sneer that he had been characterized by. Gone was the confidence. In fact, gone was his spirit. As Altair sat, watching as Maria silently ate her share of the meal, he felt strange. He felt tired. He felt spent. He didn't look forward to his assassin life anymore. Am I giving up, then? Events have proven that I am unfit to wield this blade anymore. I'm sorry. Maria turned to him and spoke with a cracked voice. For what, assassin? I am unfit to hold you prisoner. You may leave. Maria looked at him curiously, and then laughed. It felt sweet to Altair to hear someone laugh after such a long time. You know, I owe my life to you. Without you, I might have. It was my duty as your jailer. Maria slowly wiped her mouth and looked at him. That was all then. Nothing else. It was merely a whisper. And suddenly, Altair awoke. He felt excited. He didn't know why. The slightly raspy tenor of her boyish voice. Tell me the truth, Altair. It was the first time she'd ever addressed him by name, and it felt exhilarating. He didn't know which of them had moved first. All he knew that, in no time at all, his lips were on hers, and that he felt something that he'd thought he was almost incapable of feeling anymore. That night, both of them didn't sleep. Altair had never been this excited before. He didn't know what was it in Maria that riled him up so much. Her blue eyes seemed to twinkle as their bodies danced, and her straw-colored hair seemed to have a mind of its own. To Altair, at that moment, she was perfect in every sense, and when he'd confessed his love, she laughed. An assassin confesses his love to a Templar, and now I've seen just about everything there is to see, before sobering up and kissing him, as a silent reply. When they'd traveled back to Masyaf, Altair had been the one who was worried. He instructed her to keep her Templar roots a secret. To his consternation, the first thing she did was tell the assassins that she was a former Templar turned assassin before embracing Altair, and telling that she was married to him. At first, ripples of shock seemed to course through their ranks. Altair ibn La'ahad, marry a Templar. Since when did assassins commit such monstrosities? But then, they'd obeyed. Altair was now their undisputed leader, and if he saw fit, so be it, they said. Maria Thorpe was soon trusted, and with her by his side, the assassin order grew under Altair like never before. He himself supervised their education. He made sure to teach his pupils about everything he knew, and not just combat. And then, on that fateful night, the night that would change his life yet again, he'd received that letter. Saruto by Hiruzen will forever be in your debt, my friend. When he'd brought the young blonde-haired boy to Masyaf for the first time, there was a wave in Masyaf. People from every corner of their town came to see the weak little boy and taught about his ill treatment. Maria herself had taken to Uzumaki Naruto like he was her own son. Whenever he saw the two together, Maria and the boy, it struck him as to how similar the two were. And the boy reflected a bit of himself, Altair too. There was no denying it, there was something in the boy's eyes, some purity that made you want to draw him up close and ruffle his hair. Darim and Naruto had grown up like brothers. And then, the day had come. Uzumaki Naruto had earned the right to wear the blade and to utter the words. And something funny erupted in his stomach when he and Maria watched him make his first leap of faith. Not only was it a reminder as to how much the young boy had grown since he'd set foot at Masyaf, it was a reminder of how much Altair had grown too. Two changes had affected his life. The first had been his father, and the second had been Mualim. For a short, horrifying period, he'd steeped into the shoes of not a man, but a beast. But Mualim had snapped him out of it. Altair ibn La'ahad was convinced if he would ever allow a change to affect him again, it would be because of Uzumaki Naruto. Lashe Hakaka Kulo She Maumkin. As Altair ibn La'ahad watched the young boy stir, and Ezio, the other assassin, explaining to the boy's teacher and his friends, he felt confident. Whatever may stand in our way, I'm sure we'll overcome them. When the black-haired boy and his teacher turned to him, Ezio explained brightly, "Oh, he slips into those lapses often. Don't you, Master Altair, son of Bird Lalala?" He ground his teeth and looked at Ezio. "You seem to possess a death wish, assassin." Naruto. The boy had shown them a glimpse of the tailed beast's power, and it was sheer chaos. There was no doubting it. For that short period, the Kyuubi had howled, once again. the same way it had 13 years ago. I see. So the seal holding the beast inside the boy is cracking. The cause was simple enough to figure out. Haruno Sakura had been culled down right in front of Uzumaki's eyes. It was understandable, the rage. Why, even he'd lost it for a minute or so, attacking at Zabuza like that. But then, they'd each been thrown apart, him, Sasuke and Zabuza, all by the same force. And right then, these two had stepped up. Kakashi didn't know exactly what was going through the Hokage's mind, but somehow it had worked. The two assassins had put a stop to the boy's outburst, and had somehow healed Sakura, even though he himself had determined that she was hanging on by a very slim thread. Kakashi flicked a bit of dirt out of his hair and looked back up into Altair Ibn Lahad's startling gray eyes. As Altair opened his mouth to speak, the other man, Ezio, laid a hand on his shoulder. Master Altair, I am sure the explanations are important, but... Altair stopped short and cut across Ezio. I am aware. What happens to be your plan, assassin? I suggest we wait and watch before we act. Sure enough, both Altair and Ezio turned simultaneously as a man walked out of the clearing. Slightly on the plumper side, the man looked like he was having a very unpleasant time walking. Dressed in an elegant suit and a hat, he swaggered over to the worn and battered Mamachi Zabuza, completely disregarding the two assassins and the others. Altair and Ezio looked at each other, and they both shook their heads at the same time. Wait and watch before acting. Heh, looks you screwed up bad, you little shitstain. Kakashi's eyes widened. This man, walking out so boldly, had just kicked the demon of the mist. Is he? HM. Get up, you lazy bastard. I know you can move one bleedin' muscle in that shit sack of yours. Kakashi Headache frowned. He didn't know why. Something seemed to stir in the pits of his stomach. This man was obviously Zabuza's employer. This was the cause of the whole ordeal him and his students were forced to go through. Kazuna was the bridge builder, after all, a pretty important person for all his snobbishness. Then, that meant, this is the man who must want Kazuna dead, and pretty badly at that, to employ the services of the demon of the mist. The plump man seemed to growl, apparently displeased at his employee's inactivity. I said, get up, you F shit. Ezio and Altair looked at each other again. This time, they both nodded. Ezio Auditor cleared his throat. The man turned around with a snarl. Ezio raised his eyebrow. The hell do you want? It was Altair who spoke first. My friend, what you do is not something that we comply with, you see. Stuff it. Don interfade invert ... It's none of ya business. Ezio looked at Altair and raised his hand. Altair shrugged. In reply, Ezio walked forward, toward the man, whose back was turned to them, busy provoking the unconscious Zabuza. Without any hesitation, Ezio walked up to the man and, catching the scruff of his neck, pulled him around roughly. Suddenly, the silence seemed to magnify. Ezio smiled, sensing that he'd finally won the man's attention. You get your hands off of me. This time, the man didn't bluster. He didn't shout or scream. This time, he was even. His tone betrayed only the slightest bit of malice, and his teeth were bared. Can't you fucking hear me, you little prick? That's right, I said, let go of me. Ezio Auditor stood still, not even bothering to reply. His gaze was trained at the man, and there were no traces left of the smile that had previously tugged at the corners of his lips. Suddenly, it seemed as though Ezio Auditor had transformed. Another silence seemed to follow. Well ... You asked for it. Headache. Kakashi was no ordinary ninja, capable of freakishly quick thinking. He'd already sprung up. Sasuke. Uchiha Sasuke looked up at him, a slightly surprised look on his face. Behind me. Don't move. Sasuke complied immediately, unnerved by the offhand tenor Kakashi seemed to be addressing him with. The man named Altair looked back at Kakashi with a firm expression. Kakashi seemed to understand. What the hell's happening? Why are you Uchiha? Sasuke received his answer when, with no prior indications at all, a large number of armed, masked shinobi stepped out from within the forest. His mouth seemed to dry up. Shit. Kakashi tightened his gait and contemplated what to do. Naruto, Sakura and Tezuna were all unconscious, oblivious to this startling new development. The men hadn't attacked yet, obviously waiting for their master's signal. He contemplated pulling down his mask to use his Sharingan again, but decided against it. Doing so will absolutely drain me, I'm sure of it. Besides, these two ... It doesn't look like they're fazed at all by this. Especially the taller one, what's he smiling for? It was true. Ezio Auditor's lips were stretched in a wide grin. He didn't know why. For the first time since coming here, it finally looked as if he would be able to engage in full-blown battle, and the thought sent a shiver down his arms and legs. Still maintaining his grip on the man's scruff, he spoke. Master Altair ... How about a contest? The one who gets his hood off first loses. Kakashi's heart skipped a beat. or these two? He soon got his answer when the shorter assassin replied, with a hint of a chuckle. A tall claim, assassin. Nonetheless, I accept. For a second, the whole place seemed to stand still. The very next second, the man roared and his men attacked. Who are these men? Two men, clad in white, were fighting, no, destroying their enemy's army. It was as if the enemy's men were moving around with stones tied on their backs. They were simply too slow to guard against these two assassins. They moved in tandem, as if they were mirroring each other's moves. Sasuke watched, slack-jawed, as both of executed a perfect disarm, pushed the men's feet back, and brought their knees crashing up to their stomachs. He watched wide-eyed as the both of them stepped back almost lazily to avoid a powerful strike, only to step forward and counter their opponent. He watched, heart beating fiercely, as the two assassins rushed forward, side by side, raining pain down on anyone who dared to step close. He watched in awe as the realization struck. These assassins, so clean were their techniques, so precise, so technically sound were they, that not one man had been killed in the entire assault. One by one, man after man, the opposition fell prey to the assassins' precise, yet non-fatal strikes. The sounds were starting to dwindle now. A handful of men were left, the rest oblivious to their surroundings, unfortunate victims of the assassins' advance. And even the men who were left were now backing away slowly. The fat man, their employer, wasn't even screaming. He seemed to have realized his mistake, and was wide-eyed, jaw hanging open, unable to speak, paralyzed with fear. He didn't know why, but Uchiha Sasuke was panting, even though all he did was watch two men destroy an entire group of badly trained shinobi. He licked his lips and wiped the sweat off his brow. Ezio auditor sighed. Stepping aside lightly, he extended his foot, catching his attacker unawares. Before he knew it, he'd lost his balance and was falling down. Needless to say, Ezio had already rendered him unconscious before he'd even touched the ground. How goes it, Master Altair? He turned, looking at the other assassin, who was neatly dodging every attack his opponent threw at him. He smiled, but it soon turned to a grimace when he felt the man's kunai make contact with his skin. Turning around quickly, he acquainted his fist with the man's forehead, before turning to fend off the next enemy. Suddenly, they both turned, hearing a noise, only to see the kingpin making an attempt at an escape. End it, Ezio, quick. After the man. Ezio didn't need to be told twice. He turned toward his enemies. There were three of them, each with a mixture of rage and recklessness in their eyes. Ezio didn't say a word. Quicker than normal, he dropped his hand to his scabbard, and with a metallic, scraping sound, his sword was detached from its sheath. That seemed to do it for the remaining three. Up until now, they'd faced a man, a very fast, strong and skilled man at that. But the moment he drew his sword, they knew that it would be nothing but gross foolishness to go up against Ezio Auditor. Ezio turned, immediately, acknowledging the fact that the fight wasn't over yet, not until the ringleader was brought to his knees. He turned, to be greeted with a slightly startling sight. You thought you could get away with kicking me. Gato ... you bastard. Mamachi Zabuza stood, cuts and gashes running all over his powerful physique, holding his blade to his employer's neck. Now ... now Zabuza, listen here. I was just trying to wake you up. Zabuza. The man seemed to be shivering with morbid fear. There was no mistaking it. Mamachi Zabuza's eyes spoke of murder. Let's not be rash. I'll pay ya. That's it. Kill these men, and I'll pay double. How's that sound? He got his reply when he felt the cold metal caress his skin in a most tantalizing manner. You ... you cockroach. You're nothing but scum of the lowest degree. Zabuza was speaking, although in great gasps. His eyes were lidded, and his body seemed to be swaying lightly, out of weakness. And yet, his sword was held firm, turned against Gato, his employer, the man who'd wanted Tazuna dead. He turned to Kakashi. This filthy piece of shit is the reason I attacked you. My humble apologies. You see, the man, Zabuza coughed, and drew in a great breath. Looking up, he saw the taller of the two similarly clad men walk towards him. Ignoring it, he continued, now barely looking at Kakashi. This man, he took my Haku. He was a gentle boy, he was. A friend, the only one. Kakashi Headache looked on, as Mamachi Zabuza, the sword pointed at Gato, talked. Freya threatened me. He would kill him, this bastard. Mamachi Zabuza thought he felt his grip weaken. He felt Gato slip away. With an effort, he lifted his head up, to see the man remove Gato from his grip, and hold him up in his own. Gato seemed to squeal, legs shaking wildly, face convulsed. It was an unpleasant sound, and yet, Mamachi Zabuza felt at peace, hearing it. Continue, my friend, he heard the tall man say. Took him hostage. I'm sorry, Kakashi, it had to turn out this way. Zabuza was clearly making an effort now. His grip on his sword was starting to weaken. he turned toward the unconscious bodies of Naruto and Sakura. Talented kids ... you've got, especially the little fox ... and the fighter. He nodded towards Sasuke. And then, he looked up at Ezio Auditor. Well, what are you waiting for? Uzumaki Naruto stirred. The surroundings felt cool, and his body itself felt ... nice. There was absolutely no pain at all. His eyes were still closed. In fact, he didn't want to open them. He wanted to keep them shut and listen to the sounds, take in the smell some more before he opened them again. The wind was picking up, and vaguely, water seemed to lap somewhere far off in the distance. He could hear the slight rustle of leaves, and he could hear voices. One was frantic. He couldn't make it what it was saying. The other was calm, cold and collected, and it seemed to scare him just a little bit. It sounded like Master Altair when he was very serious. He knew. There was no rushing sensation, no massive inflow of thoughts, no memories flooding his head. Instead, he knew perfectly what had transpired. Sakura had been killed, and he'd lost control. It was so very clear, the sights and the thoughts that had flown through his mind at that instant. That song ... that voice, soothing and calming, tempting and luring. And then it had snapped. Some explosion had split them apart, him and the Kyuubi, the warden and his prisoner, the man and the beast. And after that, he felt put back in place, rectification. He knew Sakura had been revived, proof that she was breathing lay right next to him. Two times, on 2 different occasions, he'd lost control and had lusted after power. And on both occasions, he'd been sucked dry, thrown away by the very same power he'd tried to embrace. Convincing himself, telling himself firmly, strictly, that, as long as he lived, there wouldn't be a third occasion. Uzumaki Naruto opened his eyes to witness a sight he would never forget, as long as his memory didn't fail him. Listen now. Aye. Uzumaki Naruto sat up. Altair Ibn La had turned around, but Naruto didn't meet his gaze. Instead, his eyes were fixed on the sight in front of him. You dare not. Ezio Auditor was holding the screaming man by his hair, the underside of his left wrist hovering over the man's forehead. Mamachi Zabuza stood next to him, looking intently at Gato. Gato didn't get the time to scream as he felt the man's right hand seemingly caress his neck. His lower jaw trembled, and he broke out in cold sweat. A second later, a blade extended from the man's right hand, seemingly out of nowhere, and traveled clean through the side of his neck. Gato dropped to the ground, eyes lidded, neck bloody, and face still contorted into the ghost of his last scream. Mamachi Zabuza collapsed at the same time. His knees had given way to duress, and the strain was too much. The last thing he heard before he closed his eyes was the tall man spit at Gato and mutter some strange words. Requiescat in pace, bastardo. Yet again, in a place far, far away. The man looked up and shielded his eyes. Was this some sort of trick? Strange place ... this ... world. The surroundings were almost entirely shaded in thick shades of dark green and dark blue. Some strange bubbles were rising and falling of their own accord. In fact, you couldn't call it some anymore. As he looked on, he could spot hundreds, no, thousands of tiny bubbles, all oscillating lightly. And then it hit him. Of course, this was the sea. A blanket of bubbles, rising and falling, all emulating the waves. His head seemed to spin as he stood up and looked around. In one corner, there stood the sun, blinding as always, the one ray of hope amidst the enveloping, suffocating darkness. And he ran after it, chasing it, that sun, the hope that one day he'd actually do something worthwhile with his life. In a world without gold, we might have been heroes. His lips stretched to form a grin as he hummed to himself, chasing the ever-eluding sun. What will we do with a drunken sailor? What will we do with a drunken sailor? Early in the morning. A second blade. Altair pulled Ezio back, and whipped back his right sleeve, exposing the second hidden blade in Ezio's possession. All assassins, when they were inducted into the order, were presented with this symbol of maturity. The legendary weapon, the accessory which signified that a man would now follow the tenets of the creed until his very last breath. The hidden blade was the assassin's most trusted weapon. Yes, there were swords, knives, small ones and big ones that could be used to throw, or as a makeshift blade. But the one thing that an assassin always relied on was his hidden blade. With a simple summon, it would descend to do its master's bidding. No questions. The blade would never rust, nor would it malfunction. It would never fail its master. Very intriguing Ezio Auditor. Altair's eyes danced with the blade's lithe, sharp form, an exact replica of the one on his left hand. It didn't require the sacrifice, and would give an assassin the added up the sleeve weapon. I quite agree, Master Altair, but something tells me there are more pressing matters at hand. The boy, for a start. Altair turned around slowly and met Naruto's eyes. Everyone became silent, sensing the significance of the meeting. You won't punish me for oversleeping, will you? Haruno Sakura blinked. Her vision was bleary. She could make out a few shapes and forms in front of her, until Kakashi-sensei's head suddenly popped into view. 5 minutes more, Sakura murmured to herself, before snuggling into something soft. A whole minute later, she shot upward, realizing she wasn't in her bed. Looking around frantically, she could make out Naruto, Sasuke-kun and Kakashi-sensei all looking at her with smiling faces. Can someone tell me what's happened, because something's happened, obviously. Her vision was still clearing, and everyone were still looking at her, as though waiting for her to regain her senses properly. Sakura tried retracing her memory. Yes, something had gone wrong. Kakashi-sensei was fighting Zabuza. Then Zabuza had somehow deceived Kakashi-sensei. And then, that was it. She seemed to hit a blank wall. There was nothing. Her brain seemed to tell her to stop searching. She tried again. Yes, there was a battle between them, a lot of water, they'd even been drenched, and then Kakashi-sensei had somehow beaten Zabuza, and yet, he'd slipped. Yet, after that, again, she drew a blank. She ground her teeth. What the hell happened in between, then? Suddenly she stopped thinking. That was it. Her brain ground to a halt when she felt a pair of warm hands envelope her and hurriedly retract themselves, as though they feared for their lives. Sakura looked up, wide-eyed. Right, yeah, glad to see you, Sakura-chan. Wait, did Naruto just? Naruto. She coughed, suddenly, feeling a hand place itself heavily over her shoulder and pivot around it, turning her, slightly. She came face to face with a man, she would say, in his mid-20s, a prominent scar running across his lips, and an extremely well-chiseled face. Good morning. I must say you're much prettier when you're asleep. Both Naruto and Sasuke seemed to snort at that. A shade of light red made itself felt across her cheeks before the more pressing matter in question trumped her sudden embarrassment. Wait. Who's he, and why did he compliment me just now? Or wait, was that even a compliment? You must excuse our exuberant friend here. He tends to get into these fits of feminine attraction every now and then, with complete disregard for age or any ethical issues whatsoever. It was safe to say Sakura didn't understand a word, but she started when she saw another man, dressed well, almost identical to this one, walk forward and pull the taller man out of the way. Suddenly, she heard Kakashi-sensei clear his throat. Yes, you were going to explain. Sakura's eyes darted to their surroundings. It still looked like the same place they'd engaged in battle, yet it seemed different. They'd probably moved. Naruto and Sasuke were sitting down with their knees bunched up. Kakashi-sensei was squatting next to the shorter man, and the taller one was standing next to her. She could make out Tazuna next to Kakashi-sensei, still unconscious, as dead to the world as a burnt log. Kakashi-sensei, about our escort. I forgot. I'd hit him with a poison senbon. Naruto and Sasuke looked up at Kakashi with startled expressions at his reply. Oh no, nothing to worry about. Just before Zabuza attacked, I hit him with sleep-inducing senbon. Nothing much, really. He'd have been a discomfort in the fight, especially with. Kakashi's eyes darted to the two strange men. The taller man clapped suddenly, watching intently until they'd finished talking. Benny, now, I believe I am right in thinking that some introductions are in order. I shall go first. All of them looked up expectantly at the white-clad man. My name is Ezio Auditor Irons. Both Naruto and Sasuke raised their eyebrows, hearing Ezio's rather elaborate full name for the first time. As I've already told my young friend and his teacher, he nodded towards Sasuke and Kakashi. I am an assassin. He sat down with an oddly cheerful look on his face, oblivious to Sakura's bewildered glance at him. Altair stood up now, ready to introduce himself, but Naruto barely paid attention. Assassin just like Master Altair and me, then. But how? Is he from Masyaf? Wait, don't be stupid, of course he isn't. I know almost everyone in that place. There was no way he could have been from Masyaf. So then, assassin from another country, perhaps. Damn it. He stopped when he felt all eyes on him. Looking up, startled, he was met with a slight pat on his head from the master. Pay attention, young assassin. As I was saying. But when he had Naruto's attention, Altair stopped suddenly, with a far-off expression clouding his face. But it only lasted for a second. In fact, he continued, voice as steady as ever, I feel it would be better if Sarutobi explained it all, from the very beginning. That way you would not compromise on any of the information, you see. Kakashi nodded in response to Altair's decision. Without further delay, the assassin sat himself promptly on the ground, inducing vexation from everyone but Ezio. So that happens to be it, I take it? Sasuke asked dryly, followed by questioning nods on the part of Naruto. Kakashi, meanwhile, had gone back to examining Tazuna, their escort, for further signs of damage, while Ezio eyed Naruto interestedly. Sakura, meanwhile, wasn't much better off in terms of knowledge of the current situation. So wait, Hokage-sama sent you two to help us out and... She was interrupted by the slow drawl of the voice of Ezio, or whoever he happened to be. Listen, little girl. We're as much in the dark you are. Most of us don't know what's happened. Sakura turned towards him and nodded once he said so. Inwardly, a cleft seemed to disappear from her forehead. True, she didn't know what had transpired, what had taken place, or how Zabuza had come to this position, or, for that matter, how any of them ended up the way they were now. But then, most important of all, they were safe, and it didn't matter if anything had happened in between. They were all safe, and this horrid excuse for a mission had finally come Toa. She lifted her head up suddenly. So we still need to complete our mission, don't we? I mean, how can we? About that. Kakashi turned when Altair spoke. I happen to have orders from your Hokage. You see, he told us not to worry about your mission, which has now been transferred over as the responsibility of all of them. Listening to Altair's information, jumped and turned around at the absolutely unexpected interruption. A gruff voice seemed to cut through the air. So found you at last must have been one heck of a mission, eh, Kakashi? Asuma. The remnants of Team 10 had made themselves known to the others, courtesy of a raucous greeting on the part of Yamanaka Ino, directed undoubtedly at Uchiha Sasuke. A brief look of surprise crossed through Uchiha Sasuke's pallor before his cool mask came back on. Naruto was grinning bemusedly while Kakashi got up with a grunt and walked over to Saruto by Asuma. So, old man's orders came through. Pretty rough mission, from what he told us. Tacking down the demon of the hidden mist. Your genins must have had a pretty hair-raising adventure. He inclined his head towards the three genin, now surrounded Ino and Choji, Shikamaru frowning at the two strangely clad men, apparently their allies, from what Hokage-sama had told them. Meanwhile, Altair and Ezio walked up to their new ally. Altair had been informed of this, of course. Sarutobi had told him that he'd dispatched a secondary team to complete the rest of Team 7's mission. In all probabilities, he'd meant this group, identical in structure to Hadate Kakashi's own genin team. 1 teacher and 3 pupils. Asuma looked at them, frowning for a moment. So, circus in town, I see. Sarutobi Asuma's less than cordial greeting seemed to irk Ezio Auditor. Barely raising an eyebrow, he countered the man's jab. Haha, funny man, I see. Whoa, take it easy there, assassin, it's all in good fun, man. Kakashi sighed. The thing was ... he was not a very social person. He wasn't known for holding riveting conversations with every other shinobi he met. Asuma, on the other hand, just happened to be the most tactless buffoon on this side of the planet, known simply for pissing people off very easily. Shaking his head, he placed his hand on Asuma's shoulder and shook it lightly. This isn't the time, Asuma. I believe you're here for something. Ezio seemed to relax too. He quirked his eyebrows, then chuckled. Interesting man. Love you too, old friend. Now, down to business, as they say. Where's your escort? Kakashi nodded nonchalantly at Tazuna's still slumbering form. Asuma whistled. You seem to have escorted him well thus far. So, as Old Man Cage said, we'll be taking over, I guess. You're to head back to Konoha as quick as possible. Ezio was watching on bemusedly as Asuma filled Kakashi in on the details. Altair was standing by politely. Once Asuma had finished, Kakashi turned to the two of them. You two are coming along, I suppose. Altair shrugged. This was part of Sarutobi's orders. My part in this affair, I meant. As for Ezio, no, I do not think there is the slightest reasoning in me staying here. You see, where Master Altair goes, I go too. Altair quirked his eyebrow questioningly at Ezio's somewhat stentorian tone. He didn't raise objections though. After all, it seemed as though Ezio Auditor was in a marsh of doubt too. It was only natural he accompany them. So, it's time you left, Kakashi. Suddenly, he yanked at Kakashi's flak jacket, seeing the two men turn away. You sure about these two? Kakashi acknowledged Asuma's serious tone immediately. He was obviously being dead serious here. He understood his concern, of course, not to mention sharing them. 2 men, appearing out of nowhere like that, for all he knew, they might be. But that qualm seemed to squash itself almost willingly in Kakashi's head. Hadate Kakashi, though he didn't look like it, had witnessed some of the most hair-raisingly twisted liars and con men, being a part of the ANBU quite a while back. And even though his job had nothing to do with interrogation, questioning and the likes, he knew a liar when he saw one. It was just one of the abilities you'd be forced to pick up, surrounded by nothing but lies and violence. Asuma, believe me, I know just about as much as you do. If Hokage-sama wanted this to happen, then I don't mind them tagging along. Besides, something tells me they're as clueless as they really seem to let on. Fine, take care. Meet you later, yeah. So Sasuke-kun, how are you doing? Naruto rolled his eyes at Ino Yamanaka's almost pointlessly mundane question, to which the Uchiha grunted. Man of few words, our Sasuke. Shikamaru Nara, meanwhile, was preoccupied. Hands deep in his pockets, he seemed to be frowning at the two men and their attire. The shorter man's robes seemed to be different than his companions'. Both of the robes featured a brown, thick pouch situated conveniently at a position he realized was best for whipping out something. Presumably a small throwing weapon, he supposed, judging by the minuscule size of the pouch. On the other hand, the one prominent thing in both of the men were their swords. Sure, he'd seen Kenjutsu specialists back at the Leaf, Gekuhei being the standout among them. The thing was, these swords were different. Unlike the ninja katanas, these were completely straight. The ninja's swords be curved, the degree of curvature ranging based on the user's styles, but a completely straight sword indicated a different style of swordplay altoge. Hey, Shikamaru, huh? Deep in thought, huh? Naruto seemed to have gotten up, tired of listening to Sakura and Ino bicker about something or the other. Choji, meanwhile, had drawn out a packet of crisps from his backpack and munching away steadily, oblivious to what was happening. Yeah, those two, you know them. Naruto cleared his throat, contemplating what to say. Not exactly. You see, I was gone all this while the shorter of the two of them, Master Altair. Unknown to the two of them, Ino and Sakura were now curiously listening. Choji seemed to have caught on. Yeah, him that was the man I studied under. Ino Yamanaka leaned forward towards Naruto curiously, not wanting to miss out. He's an assassin, the two of them are. Shikamaru inclined his head for an instant, then levied Naruto with a glance. So are you. Naruto was caught off guard slightly. Sure, he'd studied under Master Altair, but the only way Shikamaru could have known was this. Shikamaru completed his train of thought by tugging deftly at Naruto's left sleeve, exposing his blade. Naruto stared at Shikamaru. Keen damn you, Shikamaru. To say the least, Naruto was impressed, observing the fact that the one thing common between the three of them, Master Altair, him and the other assassin, was the minute bulge in the sleeve of their left wrists, was keen indeed on the part of the Nara boy. Naruto observed Ino's and Choji's slack-jawed gaze belatedly. Of course, he'd left the sleeve open all this time. Low. Choji's voice was barely a whisper, indicating he was in awe of the hidden weapon under the blonde's possession. Ino was wide-eyed. Where did you get that? You just heard me, I guess. I am an assassin. Ino opened and shut her mouth, then opened it again. You're different from back then, I mean. Naruto cocked his head to one side. This had to be the first time Ino Yamanaka was giving him importance over Sasuke. This indicated the fact that she was definitely intrigued. Or she's being nosy. What happened to you, Naruto? I mean, Naruto bit his lower lip contemplatively. On the one hand, Shikamaru already knew quite a bit about him already. If he actually cared to get off his lazy ass and do some research, Naruto'd find that the Nara would put his information together to gather a lot about him. To gather a lot about me. What did he hide? His techniques, his combat style, known only to a certain extent by the likes of Sakura and Sasuke. He'd not played every hand at his disposal, that was true all right. There were a lot of things he hadn't shown them yet. And then, of course, on a completely different note, he wouldn't put it past Shikamaru to find out about him, find the truth hiding inside himself. Still, you're no match for Sasuke-kun, I bet. Naruto turned at Ino's declaration, a smile on his face. No, it wasn't malice or mockery. Are you sure, Yamanaka-san? Have you seen me in combat yet? No, I thought not. Ino was thrown back completely. With a start, she realized that this was the first time Naruto was addressing her head-on, and his suffix, Yamanaka-san, was uttered with a slight edge to it. She opened her mouth to admonish him, but stopped immediately when she realized the truth behind the blonde's statement. Just how good was he, anyway? The Kanai test had been an indication to the fact that you couldn't take the Uzumaki at face value. Sure, the first throw had been a mess up, but the second one, and the third, and the fourth. Drawing a breath, she paused. We'll see, then, when we get back. Till then, see you, Uzumaki-san. Naruto laughed at the way she threw the honorific at him, almost like a compliment to his way of greeting her. He was surprised, albeit pleasantly, at the fact that they'd actually held a civil conversation. She turned around, smiling before doing so, and running up to Sasuke and, of course, giving him a fangirl shriek-filled goodbye. Asuma walked up to them, apparently finished with Kakashi and ready to leave. Naruto looked up at him, eyes lingering on the strange sash, before meeting his eyes. Hello, Uzumaki-san. Pleased to meet you. It's nice to meet you too. Asuma, sensei. Cigarette clamped tightly in his mouth, Asuma Sarutobi studied the kid. His eyes roved over his chest, lingered on his stomach, before locking eyes with him again. There was no mistaking it. The Yondaime Hawkage's electric blue eyes looked back at him. "You're the Hawkage's son." It wasn't a question. The boy was merely stating it. "Well, it feels a lot better if you didn't address me that way, though." Naruto's blue eyes seemed to twinkle with amusement as he laughed at him. For a second, Asuma, though he saw a knowing look cross the boy's face, that look that said, "Hey, I know that feeling of being judged because of someone else as well as you do." But it immediately went to the back of his mind. The look seemed to be replaced with something else now, amusement. "Hey, what's funny, kid? Your beard's funny." The kid had touched a nerve there. "Hey, it's manly, that's what it is." "What? Manly? So you get the girls then, because of your beard?" Asuma paused, before bending forward, and leveling with Naruto. Ruffling his hair, his gruff voice seemed a bit low. "Let's just say," he whispered, and diverted his eyes at Ino, "it isn't only the beard that gets the girls." He drew back quickly, lest the others should find it strange, and patted his chest. "See you later then, Naruto." Inhaling the smoke, Asuma turned and walked off, leaving a slightly bemused Naruto and Sakura behind. "I'll be leavin', then, Kakashi. See ya." Kakashi-sensei waved a dismissing hand up at him as Asuma walked over to Tazuna in an effort to revive him. Meanwhile, Choji and Ino trotted off behind their sensei. Only Shikamaru stayed back for a moment longer. He looked at him. "I'll see you around, Naruto." Naruto raised an eyebrow before grinning at him. Turning, he saw Ezio and Altair walking up to him, ready to leave. Back to the leaf, then. Both Sakura and Sasuke were staring inquisitively at Ezio's and Naruto's conversation. All of them were trudging back to Konoha, mentally stressed and ready for some explanations. Kakashi and Altair were walking up front, talking about something or the other, but Naruto had struck up an animated conversation with the second assassin, Ezio Auditor. Sakura stared as Naruto laughed, then sobered up, before pointing at Altair, before both of them burst out laughing again. Ezio seemed to have taken to the blonde-haired young man readily. By the way they were discussing, Sakura was sure they could convince anyone they were old friends. "Just what is up with you, Naruto? A while back. So, I see you have the hidden blade, young boy. Know what it means, by any chance?" Naruto, preoccupied with thought, was lagging behind when he heard the taller of the two assassins' question directed at him. Looking up, he met Ezio Auditor's eyes. "Course I do. I'm an assassin." Ezio raised his eyebrow, smiling. "At such a young age. How old must you be?" 13. Naruto frowned. "Pretty much, yeah. So at your age how much do you know of the way of the assassin?" "Little boy. Enough. And more." Ezio chuckled at the young boy's curt reply. "Hey, I studied under the man." Naruto pointed at Altair, and Ezio looked up, nodding. "Besides, you seem to know him how?" Ezio looked up, palms rubbing together lightly. Ezio Auditor simply didn't know how to phrase the answer. In fact, the very reason he was here seemed ambiguous. All he knew was that he needed to do something. Minerva hadn't sent him here for nothing. He had a purpose, some sort of difference. Well, that happens to be a longer story than is suitable for narration at this point. Naruto turned away from him, hands in his pockets. Inhaling, he thought about the events that had occurred in this infernal mission. Things had gone horribly, nightmarishly wrong for them, yet it seemed so convenient, the fact that Master Altair and another assassin would pop up to save them. Of course, these two seemed as clueless as him about the entire ordeal, so that put his mind at ease. The taller one, the assassin talking to him, now intrigued Naruto, though he didn't make a show of it. Not even one single assassin in Masyaf ever had two blades. The first sight that he'd registered after regaining consciousness had been of this man using a second blade to kill. And how had things come to that? What were the pool of unconscious bodies doing lying down like that? How had Sakura? Yes, there were far too many questions to be answered. And the worst part was, he had a niggling doubt in the back of his mind, a doubt that seemed to tell him not all of those questions were going to be answered. Not immediately, anyway. "So, you're an assassin too. You have two blades, to say nothing of the sword." Ezio looked down at the young boy's gleaming eyes. He was obviously new to this. Back in his time, young boys, why, even himself were never this serious, leave alone being inducted to the order. On the other hand, this boy seemed to know what he was doing. Ezio had observed, when Naruto was talking to his friends, the other teacher's pupils. "You know how to wield a sword, little boy." Ezio's tone wasn't mocking, only mildly playful, poised elegantly between a statement and a question. "Yeah, well, not much really." Naruto paused, before making up his mind. You see you're coming with us to our village. The village hidden in the leaves. Konohagakure. Ezio nodded seriously, keeping up with Naruto. We're all a certain let's say type of people called shinobi. I see. Ezio nodded. It was easy to see that the silver-haired teacher, the other bearded man who'd initially made fun of him, and the 3 students, this young boy included, had that much in common. So you're an assassin and a shinobi. Well yeah, sorta. See, I was taken away from this village of mine and put under the tutelage of Master Altair. That was way back when I was 7 years old or something. And now I've returned back to this village. Ezio smiled, keeping track with Naruto, paying attention to the young boy as he spoke of his days at Masyaf. Ezio somehow inexplicably found himself warming up to the child. It was just that he was so melancholically serious for someone his age, at least in relation to himself. So, yeah, Master Altair is pretty strict, though Masyaf was wonderful to be in. Ezio nodded his approval. The memories were still vivid, that time when he'd journeyed to the place during the harsh winter. Back then, he'd felt so tired. He didn't what he was looking for, yet he knew he was looking for something. On the other hand, here he was, with even less of a clue about the events that were transpiring, yet thoroughly enjoying it. So back to swordplay you know how to wield a sword, little boy. Hey, that's annoying ezio the name's Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto it is, then. You know how to use swords. As I was saying, Master Altair made me learn it, though I've only rarely actually used one. Naruto's eyes darted to Ezio's sword, hanging by his waist. Well, young Naruto, I shall make sure I teach you the intricacies, if the following events permit us to do so. Really? You mean you'd teach me how to actually fight with swords? That'd be awesome. Thanks, Ezio. Ezio laughed, before continuing, among other things. I can teach you a lot, young Naruto. But, for the time being, aren't your friends calling you? As Naruto looked forward and jogged up to his 2 young friends, Ezio Auditor smiled. He felt so at ease, even though the future seemed foggy. And why shouldn't he? These men seemed good men, and Master Altair seemed to trust them. He looked around, taking in the roughly hewn path, the way it seemed to meld into the rough thicket of bushes by the side. The air was neither warm nor cool, he noted, and the weather was pleasant. He ran his fingers over the artifact inside his robes lightly. He opened his eyes. What? His usually deep voice seemed raw and throaty. Everything seemed blurred. All he could see was a few greens and a lot of white. Suddenly, he sensed an upheaval in his chest, and he turned, ready to throw out whatever was making him uncomfortable. Instead, nothing came. He panted, and his eyes teared up, obscuring the little vision he seemed to have at that point. What just? It was a merry troop indeed that made its way inside the Konohagakure gate that evening. The 2 guards, Izumo and Kotsu, eyed them strangely before realizing Kakashi's presence and nodding questioningly at him. Kakashi seemed to shrug in reply. Meanwhile, Altair was looking around interestedly. That last time he'd been here was to take Naruto away, and after quite a while, he was back. The place had changed, some glaring and some minutely. Yet, Altair ibn Laya had recognized the same chatter that seemed to float through the air, so much in contrast to the quiet, still atmosphere that Masyaf was characterized by. Stay close, Ezio. Altair turned towards the blonde-haired boy, who, to much his amusement, had somehow become very amiable towards Ezio Auditor. The 2 of them were talking, as Naruto pointed out the various shops to the tall assassin excitedly. Ezio turned to look at him for an instant, before smiling and looking back at Naruto. Meanwhile, Sakura was almost dying with jealousy. How could Naruto get so friendly with the man, when she was obviously way more polite and endearing? That's the tea leaf street, she suddenly quipped in, seeing that Naruto didn't know a certain area. Ezio turned to look at her and nodded for her to go on. And so, the 2 genins regaled him with the various items of interest at Konoha, while Sasuke walked by, observing the tall assassin closely. Kakashi walked on, uninterested as ever, nose buried inside his book yet mysteriously knowing where he was going. As they walked, most of the people paused whatever they were doing to look at the group walking by. The various stall owners gawked at them, open-mouthed, thrown off by 2 strange men walking amidst their ninjas as though they knew the place. Ah, here we are. The first stop, Hokage-sama's building. Altair ibn La had seemed to have a strange glint in his eye. You had better tell me what's going on, Sarutobi. Altair's voice twisted itself into a snarl, directed venomously at Sarutobi Hiruzen, the SomeDamn. Patience, my good friend, patience. First, we have more pressing matters at hand. He seemed to nod at the 3 genin, motioning them forward. Patting the three of them on the head, he drew out 3 packets. Here you are, 500 ryo each, as much pay as a low-level ranking mission. You 3 have obviously held out well. Naruto didn't say a word as he pocketed the pay. Sakura and Sasuke did the same. And now, the 3 of you need to get some rest. Go on ... Don't worry, it'll all become clear as we go on. What? But ... What about? Naruto was silenced by Sakura, who pulled him out of the room as Sasuke followed. Shut it, Baka. Hokage-sama was being serious back then. We all need some answers too, not you alone. She's right, Dobe. Let's go. Naruto looked incredulously at Sasuke and Sakura and then nodded resignedly. Alright ... Alright then. Ikaraku ramen, my treat. As Naruto bounded off, Sakura and Sasuke both stared at him before following. So, I'm yet to meet our friend here. Ezio Auditor, I presume. All 3 of them, Kakashi, Altair and Ezio, raised their eyebrow in obvious surprise. Ah, yes, just as expected. And now, I shall apologize to all of you for having sprung quite a surprise. Before you admonish me, listen to my tale. The Apple of Eden. I'm sure you 2 assassins are very familiar with this. Yes, but let's just say ... They're not quite what they look like. Sarutobi Hiruzen was standing in the center of his office, surrounded by the 2 assassins, Might Guy, Kurenai Yuhai, Kakashi, and 2 other Jonins. But, for the benefit of all the others present here, I shall start at the beginning. You see, those artifacts you have are only mere pieces, parts of a whole. The 2 assassins nodded, while the others listened with full concentration. Now ... Do either of you know how many pieces exist? 5, came the unified reply. That is correct. And these ... Pieces ... Can only be utilized by those with assassin blood running through their veins. Excuse me, Hokage-sama ... But what is assassin blood? Kurenai interrupted, not wanting to miss out on any of the details. This whole thing had to be pretty important to merit a summon from the Hokage himself. You see, our 2 assassins here possess something common. A special ability, am I right in saying so? Both of them nodded, Altair intrigued by Hiruzen's extent of knowledge about the assassin order. We shall go into those details later. But, the important thing is that this ability is only accessible to an assassin. Now, here comes the most important part, the bridge that joins 2 seemingly unconnected phenomena. All of them leaned in, Altair and Ezio included, at the Hokage. You see, there exist certain, shall we say, concentrations, and powerful, terrifyingly powerful concentrations of negative energy. These concentrations ... They manifest themselves in certain forms. 9 different forms to be exact. Ezio Auditor frowned. Concentrations ... Of what? Negative energy ... How shall I put it? You see, just as you assassins have special ability that you can use ... We ninja possess specialities too, the most important one being able to project our energy in an outward form, and manipulating these ... Are you following? Ezio nodded. He was not entirely new to that ... He'd witnessed the battle between Kakashi Hadake and the Demon of the Mist firsthand. Suten, Suryuden no Jutsu. You see, just as we project our energy, our chakra, there exist negative projections of this energy too. Simply put, these projections take the form of 9-tailed beasts. Altair nodded, following this part. He'd not been new to the fact that Namikaze Minato had suppressed the most powerful of them. It was just that he'd been so detached to the entire thing, confining himself to the assassin events. And now, here was Sarutobi, telling him it was all connected. These tailed beasts, these monstrous concentrations of negative chakra ... They roam the lands, each spread pretty far apart from the other. Now, since we've had no option but to find ways but to suppress these beasts, this, as Altair would know, involves sealing each one in a human host, a Jinchuriki. He paused, before going on, ... The 9 tails, Kyuubi, being the most powerful ... is sealed inside none other than Uzumaki Naruto. Ezio's eyes widened in horror. You ... You mean ... You meant to say that you've put a demon inside a boy. The SomeDamn raised his hand to quell Ezio. Wait, let me finish, Ezio Auditor. Now, although we've managed to seal each beast inside a human, the process is highly unstable, resulting in a shaky situation. These beasts, you must understand, are monstrous creations. Therefore, in order to, shall I put it like this, provide an extra protection mechanism, we have. And to Altair's shock, Sarutobi pointed at his robes, undoubtedly signifying the apple. The Apple of Eden, split into 5 pieces. Each piece possesses its own unique power, its own specialty. But, when combined, when all 5 of them are brought together, when all 5 are fused, and when all 5 become one, that is when the true power of the apple is realized. The terrifying power, the implication of the fact that, for the first time, man shall control power, and not the other way around. All of them were holding their breaths as the Hokage revealed his information. You see, my friends, Ezio Auditor is not a man from this certain timeline. He comes from around about 200 years from today. And the purpose of his summoning here, to have transcended the very rules of nature, to have bent its very laws and snatched him away, to be brought here is this. To protect not just that piece of Eden, which is now being coveted by an unknown force, but no, to protect lives, to protect. The Hokage stopped, breathless and in earnest. To protect the world, to protect from this foolie's oppressor, this entity that wants to possess the apple, to control the beasts. My friends, to protect this feeble old man who has entered into a contest with the devil himself. He stopped and looked at Ezio and Altair before bowing. Hokage-sama, wait, Hiruzen, if 5 pieces exist. Ah, how forgetful of me. Here we are. The Hokage drew out a seal and punched it onto the wall to his side. Suddenly, a door seemed to open. Light was dimmed. It looked like a surgery, Ezio mused. All of them peered in, Kakashi, Ezio, Altair, Kurenai and the rest. All of them peered in to see a pale, gaunt body, clothed in apparel similar to Ezio and Altair's. Sandy, matted hair, thin lips and powerful hands. Edward Kenway stirred momentarily, stopped, and stirred again. Our 4th and 5th shall arrive shortly, I presume. Suddenly, he sensed an upheaval in his chest, and he turned, ready to throw out whatever was making him uncomfortable. Instead, nothing came. He panted, and his eyes teared up, obscuring the little vision he seemed to have at that point. What just? Connor Kenway's vision cleared finally, to reveal, undoubtedly, the unconscious visage of Haytham Kenway, the man who called himself his father. What happened? So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author SomeDamn author on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.